I'm Paula Radcliffe, and it is a pleasure to be back here in Dubai with this amazing weather, stunning scenery and skyline behind me, and looking forward to the 2025 Dubai Marathon. On the women's side, previous champion and third place last year, Dera Dida of Ethiopia leads the field. On the men's side, we have some big names coming here. Dennis Kimetto, former world record holder over the marathon, Elisa de Sisa, and a whole group of other men looking to make their mark on marathon racing as the 2025 season kicks off.
"4 years of proud in being part of the world and being a marathon hub, and Dubai now is the destination of the marathon. We'd like to thank all efforts has been shown since day one until now, and for sure all together we'll work to make this marathon even better and better in coming years, inshallah. I think our culture says that the guests are on the home and we are the guests here, so they are mostly welcome anytime, but I think this is the correct time to visit Dubai in terms of nice weather, hospitality, a lot of sports events. They can enjoy whatever they like. We cover like more than 55 type of sports, but particularly we are talking about running, so they will enjoy their run in Dubai. They will see their lovely Dubai as well during the very nice weather that they expect also. So we would like again to say welcome all of you in your lovely city, Dubai.
It promises to be a fabulous day's racing. Superb elite fields gathered together again, mostly East African, of course, Ethiopian and Kenyan, chasing fast times and big prize money here in the fabulous city of Dubai. Paula, so much to look forward to these next couple of hours.
Absolutely, and the athletes are raring to go, all fired up and ready to kick off 2025 with some fast performances here in Dubai, as we've seen previously.
As you can see, the race kicks off at 6 a.m, so in about 11 minutes time, local time, and then the mass race with thousands, and that goes off at 7 a.m, 1 hour after the elite. There's a high-quality 10K road race, not part of the main card here, at 8:15 local time. That'll be after the elite men have finished their marathon. One Ailish McColgan is running in that one of Europe's top half marathon racers. I don't know how much we'll see of that, but the focus is very much upon the marathon racing today.
Well, as you can probably gather, we're on the beach, and it's the famous Jumeirah beach in Dubai. Over 25 years of the Dubai Marathon nowadays, and personal confession, I've been to most of them, and we've had some of the most famous names in world athletics competing here. Haile Gebrselassie, multiple world record holder, multiple Olympic gold medalist, and his equally famous younger compatriot, Kenenisa Bekele. But over the last decade or so, the organisers have made a virtue of offering debutantes a chance to make a name for themselves. And no better example of how that has been a success is Tamirat Tola, who won the Olympic marathon in Paris, and Ruth Chepngetich, who a couple of months later, the Kenyan, won the Chicago Marathon in a new world record, taking it under 2 hours, 10 minutes. Well, adjacent to the annual Dubai Marathon, there is a 10K race on Sunday. Now, one of the biggest mistakes that novice marathoners or 10K or 5K runners make is they start too fast. So my tip as a lifelong runner is simply this: feel your way into the race, learn to pace yourself, take the first K easily, because you're going to have plenty of time to develop your race pace in the subsequent kilometers, and you'll probably end up with a series of personal bests, not just one.
So, Pat, winding up expectations for this, and should we take a quick look at the course, Tim? I think you had a wander around it, didn't you, to see what it looks like out there. Very, very fast course, very few turns, right?
I did indeed, yes. It's been rather glorious weather here, about 23, 25 degrees during the day in Dubai these last 2 or 3 days since I've been here, flying in from London, where of course we've had snow. But that was the only time I got out in the sun, Paula.
Just to have a look at that course and the way it pans out. This is of course the start that you're looking at. They start in the darkness and will of course finish in sunshine and warmer conditions. That's why they start so early on.
This is Sakim Street, where the marathon starts, actually about 50 metres behind the camera you're seeing me from. This is the first few hundred metres down to the left-hand turn by the coast, where they head out on the long straights, which are brilliant for marathon running. They get into a nice rhythm there. The energy here right now, of course, is all about traffic. It's Friday afternoon. On race morning, as you're going to watch in a few minutes' time, the energy will come from the athletes, a very, very different kind of energy. This is the most northern point of the course on Jumeirah Beach Road. The athletes will have come from the south up to this junction, up to these lights, where they'll do a big sweeping right-hand U-turn and head back down south again. They pass here at about 19.5 kilometres and about 34 kilometres. So it's a point from which the second time they negotiate this junction, they're effectively on the finishing straight. But for me, this is where the racing starts in real earnest, with about 8 or 9 kilometres to go. Maybe about 25 minutes of hard running to come. You know this building, the Burj Al Arab, one of the most famous in the Middle East. Actually, one of the most famous in the world. Look at it, it's just gorgeous. Anyway, I'm at the 12-kilometre point now initially, because they've run to the south 6 kilometres, come back up here after a U-turn to 12k, and then they pass the Burj Al Arab for the first time. Head 7k up the road, due north, actually in a dead straight line, dead flat, perfect for a lovely rhythm for marathon runners. Do a U-turn at the far end, come 7k back to here. Now that 14k loop here is done again, they repeat it. So they pass the Burj Al Arab 4 times, and the 4th time they see it, it'll be a very, very welcome sight. Because all they've got to do now is go down here a few hundred metres to the south, turn left into Sakim Street and to the finish line. A very, very welcome sight that'll be for everybody.
So let's have a look at what that looks like on this very cool map, 3D map. There is the start, and it is a very short run out to that first left turn, and then they head out at about 6k down to the first turnout point at the south here. They will turn there just in front of the Westin, come back past the one and only Mirage, through Al Safur and back towards the Medina here. They'll pass the Medina and go by the Burj Al Arab for the first time. You were standing there, Tim, and this will be the loop that they will run twice over. So they'll go right out to, I think it's Al Masur Road, Al Masur Street, Al
Hamal Street, yeah, no, that's right. And this is where they're heading south again. There's 21k, they've just passed halfway there. They've got to do this, effectively a loop. It's like a long running track. It just happens to be about 7 kilometres long. It's about 4.5 English miles. There they turn again and head out again to the far end for the final time, up to the northernmost point of the course.
So memories for the athletes just after the first of those turns out to the north. That will be the halfway point coming up, and on this time around that will be about 34 kilometres, and they turn around, they will head back down this straight, and then there is just that one final left-hand turn to swing round into the finish, a little bit past where they started, up to this finishing straight and the welcome sight of a fast time awaiting.
Well, we're very used to perfect conditions here in Dubai, and it is very much the case this morning. It's around 14 degrees centigrade, not expected to get much higher than about 15 or 16 this morning. Anything under 20 is okay. No wind whatsoever. It's dry, of course. Very, very flat, good quality road surfaces here in the city of Dubai. And those long straights we saw on that map just now are exactly what top athletes need. Nobody knows that better than Paula Radcliffe here. Paula, who won New York 3 times, London 3 times, won a world title, set world records. Paula, how vital do you think it is for an athlete to be able to just get into that nice rhythm and almost be able to switch off mentally rather than having to negotiate twists and turns and avoid bodies on those turns and so on?
I think it's really important, and we won't see, I don't think, a huge amount of jostling for position in the start here, because there are so few turns, and there are so many straights, and there is time for it to pan out and settle in. They know the pace that the pacemakers are going to set out at. They know that coming here to Dubai, that will happen. The pacemakers will run the pace that they've said they will, and they essentially just have to, as you've said, just relax, settle in, get on the train almost, and just stay patient through that first half. And as the sun comes up, we will then see the pace starting to rise. That's been a theme here, hasn't it? If they go out steadier, and then the humidity, it's fairly high, but it's nothing terrible, is it?
Yeah, those conditions are pretty much perfect. Wind speed 8 kilometers per hour. I don't know where, because we were outside 5 minutes ago. We're up, the commentary booth is right beside this start line, and there's not a breath of wind. So maybe out on the bay there's wind, but 16 degrees centigrade, I think that's said. The good thing is that it's not going to climb much, is it? You know, sometimes, I think last year it was quite humid and a bit warm. This year it looks like it's going to be better conditions.
Yeah, it's a good 2 or 3 degrees cooler than last year, and certainly a lot less humid. I think it's about 30% less humid today, so the athletes will be really happy about that. It's actually forecast to drop in temperature slightly just before the sun rises, and then warm up again.
So there's a list of past winners. You can see some fabulous names there, and Gaetane Molla in 2019 setting that men's course record 2:03.34. That's going to be tough to beat. I don't know if we'll see course records today. You know, these are not machines, these guys. They're racing. That's the most important thing. We want to see great racing. They want to win the prize money. But in the women's field, if anything, as we see that past winners list with the course record having been set last year by Tigist Ketema, she ran, what, 2:16.07. There's a greater depth field on the women's side, I think.
I think there is. We see Dera Dida was the champion in 2023, actually the same year that her brother-in-law, because she's married to Tamara Tola, won the men's race. And the depth and the caliber and the quality, I think, on the women's field is more current and going to provide a little bit more of a battle. I think there's a lot of young debutantes coming through on the men's side that are hoping to break through and make their mark.
There are pacemakers, of course, from the men and women. There into the white vest centre of picture is Dennis Kimetto, former world record holder. He's 40 years old now as Kimetto. Broke the world record in Berlin back in 2014. Yes, 11 years ago. What about 10.5 years ago? He's a winner of Chicago and Tokyo as well in years gone by, Kimetto. And frankly, he's here really more as a sort of honouring run. He hasn't run a competitive international quality race for quite a few years, even though he looks very, very fit. But in honour of his fame and past achievements, he's given number one.
Number one, and I think pretty much the lone Kenyan aside from pacemakers in this race, and amongst all of the Ethiopians who come, of course. Big strength in depth, and known, it's talked about back in Ethiopia that this is a place to come to and run fast. And just at the top of that, Tolosa actually is a very high caliber as a miler, was second in the Bislett mile and beat a couple of Inga Britsons that day.
I've got Boki Deriba down as my dark horse as well, wearing number 16. These are some of the others as well. The pacemakers are there, and the debutantes fill the higher number positions. And it's always lovely. This race does have this huge tradition for sort of bringing new names to the fore with fast times here in Dubai, if not wins. There's the elite women's field, and that is a very strong field indeed. Tigist Germa Getachew is a 2:18.4. She's the fastest. She's the fastest here with that time from Valencia a couple of years back. But as you mentioned, Dera Dida in very good form, married to the Olympic marathon champion, so there's a bit of winning form in that family.
And they do train together, don't they? But she said she keeps up on the steady runs, and then we'll be a little bit behind on the workouts.
Well, the officials doing a wonderful job. Big shout out for all the officials here as they get to the start line. It is 6 a.m. here in Dubai as we get this 24th edition underway. They're off then on the streets of Dubai. Sukim Street, they have about 600 meters here, dead straight down to the first turn where they take a left, and then they run along the coast road with the sea on their right effectively, and go dead straight for about 5.5 kilometers. And these long straight stretches, Paul, are ideal for these fellas to get into a nice rhythm early on, and the women as well. Women have got pacemakers. There's 3 pacemakers in the women's race.
Yep, the women have pacemakers, and they have, of course, gone off with the men as well. So any of those slower men, or maybe not having quite such a good day, will be in amongst the elite women. And it is a little bit of a game to make sure, a gauging game, just to make sure that the women don't get sucked into going off too quickly. You can see already that is fragmenting into 2 groups, but the danger would be to go off too quickly on the back of the men's pace and then pay for that later on.
Well, it's not unusual for races in the Middle East or in Asia to start in the dark because of temperatures. I've worked at the Singapore Marathon in the past, and most of the races run in pitch darkness. I think it starts about 4 in the morning when I was there a few years ago. But as you can see, they've already negotiated that left-hand turn. That was the start of the 10K they've just passed, which gets underway later on. That goes off at, what did we say, 8:15, so in just over 2 hours' time. But yes, clear separation very early on with, what, only a minute and a half on the clock between the elite men and the elite women here. I wonder how long it'll be before these packs break apart, because the women in particular, Paula, are going for very, very ambitious times here. They're going out at, what, 68 minutes for halfway, so 2:16 pace.
Yep, there are 2 pace groups, and you can see there are already 2 men getting themselves into position at the lead of each of the pace groups. There's a 68 pace, which is a 68 half, would give you 2:16, and then there's a 70, so a 2 hours 20 pace as well. And I think for many of the women making their debut, it would obviously be more sensible to go with that second group, and it will be the more experienced racers that you see making that decision to latch on to the quicker pace, and then probably starting to look around and chat amongst themselves as well, and gauge, do they want to scale that back a little bit and then maybe pick it up a bit more in the second half of the race. I certainly find it's much easier to run negative splits in a marathon, so to go out and then to build off that and come back faster in the second half.
Funnily enough, though, when the world record on the men's side was set by the late Kelvin Kiptum in Chicago a couple of years back, 18 months or so ago, he ran negative splits, didn't he? He ran his second half was 59:47, and yet when Eliud Kipchoge ran his world record, the previous world record a year or 2 earlier, his first half was much quicker. Yes. So it can work either way.
It does work either way, but I think if you look, the majority of world records tend to be set the negative split way. Certainly it's a nicer way. I think you feel better finishing than you do when you're really holding on and kind of falling apart and trying to hold it together. The exception being, of course, Chepengetich in Chicago, who ran substantially positive splits and essentially broke all the rules for marathoning in the first half of that race, but managed to hold on for a phenomenal sub 2:10 performance.
It was incredible, wasn't it, for those of you who are not up to speed with marathon racing and records, so to speak. In Chicago last October, the 13th of October, almost a science fictional time, a time that nobody thought would be reached for another few years, was run by the Kenya's Ruth Chepengetich. She ran 2:09:56, under 2:10, which until about 6 or 7 years ago was considered world-class time for a man, and now the women are getting into that territory. A lot of that is down to innovations in training, but also to the tech innovation in the shoes that the athletes are wearing, which have really come on stream in the last 6 or 8 years. And Chepengetich is 2:09:56. We'd like to think that won't be touched for years and years, but then we were talking a couple of days ago and saying, well, frankly, it'll probably only be a year or two before a woman runs 2:08, and another year or two after that before a woman runs 2:07, which to me just sounds absolutely bonkers. It sounds like totally impossible, but that was the case a few years ago. Now it's reality, more or less. This is the front of that elite men's field. They're looking to go out here at a very, very quick tempo. We're hoping for something around the 2:04, 2:05 area for a winning time here today. I don't know if the course record is going to be threatened. Remember, that's at 2:03:34 by Getane Mola Tamire, to give him his full name. That was back in 2019. It was his debut at the age of 25, and he ran one of the fastest times in the world for that year.
We're just waiting. They must. We can see the clock on the screen says a running time approaching 5 minutes. The splits haven't yet come through to us for the first couple of kilometres. I did get a 2K split at 4:33, which would be exceptionally quick running. So I'm not sure that was right.
Yeah, no, they'd need to be running about 2:56 to run 2:04. 2:56 per kilometre run, 2:04 tempo. So we'll get the splits sorted out for you as soon as we can, and certainly when they go over the timing mats, which are at every 5k, we'll give you those splits. But this is quite a big men's pack.
It is a substantial men's pack, and you can see them already slotting into formation. So the reason that the Ethiopians in particular tend to run almost in single file, not more than 2 abreast, is because they do spend a lot of time training on those winding paths up in the mountains, one behind each other, eyes just down on the ground for things to trip over and to avoid those ahead of you, and just focusing on maintaining cadence, maintaining rhythm. And when they come into racing situations, do kind of slot into that formation. There's very little wind. It's not for reason of sheltering from the wind. It is really just how they have trained and how they're prepared to come in. And you can see just at the back of that women's pack, there's one of the athletes maybe perhaps struggling to stay with them. And as I say, that just picks it up a little bit. Everybody looking comfortable, as you would expect at this stage.
Well, Paula, the vast majority of these fields, men and women, are from Ethiopia. They're all based in Addis Ababa, the capital city. And I was there 18 months or so ago and trained up in the Entoto forests on the hills high above the city. And I went for an early morning jog with some people, and I didn't realize that I was up at 10,000 feet and I was out of breath within a couple of minutes. I was in a terrible state. And you were talking about how they run in single file because the paths are narrow and they have to watch where they're going. I tripped over. After about 5 minutes, I think I was gasping desperately for oxygen, and there wasn't much about, and I tripped over on a stump and went down very, very heavily, and I just lay there for a while recovering. Actually, it was quite a nice rest, apart from the skinned knee. But yeah, these athletes train in an atmosphere where there's very, very little oxygen, high up in the Rift Valley. They come down to sea level. The sea, by the way, is only 100 meters or 2 away from where they're running, in the darkness in the background there. And of course, the oxygen in the air is much thicker. Those of you who don't understand altitude training or altitude, thinner air up there, thinner oxygen levels in the air, and they come down here and they're breathing in more oxygen, and for them it's luxurious. They feel supercharged. Yeah. And you and I have both done altitude training, and it's a very genuine thing, isn't it?
It is, and nothing beats really the first time, does it? The first time that you've been up to altitude, struggled with that lack of oxygen, your body has adapted, become a lot more efficient, and you basically come down and feel like somebody gave you a battery pack for the first few runs that you come down, and certainly the races. And then after that, that improvement and that help is always there in terms of it feeling much easier when you come back down, and there's normal amount of oxygen in the air and your body has become that much more efficient. But yeah, never quite as good as that first time.
Kilometre and quicker, and I think they've just rebooted. In fact, the 5k time has just come up 15:04 for the men. That is on the slow side.
It is, confirmation of the 5k by the fact that they've just picked up the drinks bottles, and that is the first of the elite athlete drink stations. They'll have them every 5 kilometres. They had to hand in their bottles by about 7 p.m. last night, so immediately after the technical meeting there were a lot of athletes frantically mixing up bottles and handing them in, and they are then of course stored overnight and put out on the tables, and they are issued very exact instructions as to where their bottle will be on which of the 11 tables out there.
Well, that's 15:04 clocking for 5k. We'll wait for that to be doubly confirmed, but it's a 2:07 pace, so it's steady, if not super fast. It's reasonably quick, and if they do run negative splits, we're going out at basically about 63 and a half minute pace for the first half. They'll come back with a second half probably a couple of minutes quicker than that. The last few kilometres, well, the splits are all over the place, so we can't believe those, but I do believe that 5k split of 15:04. And the women, I'm not sure we're getting splits yet for the women coming through at all. The women should be, no splits appearing at all for the women at the moment.
I think from the shot now, I mean, looking at the time, there must be around about, if they are sticking to that pace as requested of 68, then they should be approaching, that might be the 5k mat they've just gone over there.
16:55-ish, if we're to believe that. That sounds a bit on the slow side to me. Paula, come on, you're the mathematician here. You've got all this stuff.
I'm looking at the split there. I think the 16:35 5k might actually be from the women's race.
Yeah, that's not leading men.
That's not the men. So yeah, around about that pace. No, it's a it's about right. It's
Well,
about
so what
on
was that mat we just saw them cross? 16:35. I'm so sorry if you're watching us and listening to us and you're sounding confused, because that's we're confused as well. Yeah, that's 2:20 pace. 16:35 for the women is exactly 2:20 pace. So they're doing okay. They're doing okay. That's nice, steady running for the first 15-20 minutes of the race so far.
Fastest in the women's field is Tigist Girma with a 2:18.52. So absolutely, if you're trying to come back a little bit quicker, then that's very sensible running in this first 5 kilometres.
Well, lots of motorbikes alongside the athletes there. We're just getting that camera shot from in front of the athletes, and here we get a chance to see a few of them. Demissi is up there as well. Tadele Demissi, Ymer, wearing number 10. He's in the orange to the left of picture. He's making his debut. And a 61.53 for a half marathon in Padua a couple of years back. So all he's got to do is double that. Now the leading women at 5k, 16:36. There it is, 16:36. And as I said, that is almost exactly on 2:20 tempo. Welde, Ymer, Dida, Tahir, Tigist, they're all there, all those big names that we were expecting. Tigist Girma is that leading in that leading pack. Pacemakers, as ever, doing a thorough job checking their watches to see that they're getting the splits right. They will quite often they write down the splits on their hands, on the back of their arm, or the side on their forearms. Did you ever do that, Paula? Ever write it on? Not in any of your marathons?
No, I knew in my head. I actually didn't have too much of a complex plan. I a lot of times just had a rough mile pace that I was trying to hit, or quicker than, and then tried to stick to that and just run a little bit more in tune with what I'd done in training effort-wise, and try and find that point that kind of I trained my body to, rather than trying to hit exact splits.
Well, you're British, so you would think in miles, but then you've only got to have a figure in mind every 5 minutes, whereas if it's every kilometre, you've got to have a figure in mind every 3 minutes or so. Yeah. So it actually helps a bit to be a mileage thinker rather than a kilometre thinker.
Yeah, it does, and to be able to transition between the two as well, because depending on where you're racing, the markers are going to come up in Ks or miles, and the easy one is the 2:20 pace, because that's about 5:20 mile in 3:20 Ks. It's the only one they line up on.
You can reel it off like that. The rest of us, crikey.
Well, the 20s are kind of consistent, so it makes it easier.
There you can see to the right of picture one of that's what they're calling the Batmobile, that bike, that camera car with 3 wheels. It's got a wheel at the back with a white light above it, and just easing along in front of this elite men's field, who are really beginning to shift now. We'll have a look at the splits. The women, 16:36 for their 5k, and the men, well, they are ploughing along. They've gone through 6k now, and again the splits are coming out very, very strangely. I mean, that probably a 2:54, that 6 kilometre. It says 3:54 on our timing system, so just needs a little reboot, I think. Doesn't matter. This is the turnaround at 6k, so that's the southernmost point of the course, and this is the only time they negotiate that U-turn, the first of the race.
Yeah, and you can see there's what, 5 or 6 women away on that lead group, with the 2 pacemakers trying to take them through to that, well, 2:16 pace, but we've realised that it's a little bit sitting back off that, and it is at the moment Welde at the front, who is the one most keen to keep the pace, pushing along. I mean, she has very strong pedigree. She was finished 7th in the World Cross Country, which was a good performance. Initially 8th, of course, and then upgraded after the disqualification of someone who was 4th in the World Juniors in Cali back in 2022 as well, over 3,000 metres. So it has some speed if she needs it.
I mean, Paula, 21 minutes on the clock. If you were having a bad day at the office and you dropped away from the pack already, and you're thinking, I've got 2 hours, way more than 2 hours to go here, are you almost better off making a quick decision to wind it up, step off the road, go and figure out what is wrong, whether you've got a bug or something is going on, and saving it for another day? Because there are so many races coming up in the next few months. You know, the spring marathon season with Paris and Boston and London and Rotterdam in April. But through February and March, there's plenty of marathons to choose from, Rome and Seville and so on.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's difficult. I think in the opening, even the opening 10K, certainly that is the case. If you're really not feeling great, then probably just step aside. Thankfully, I never had to make that decision. Usually when you spend a lot of time building up for it and then you start to get into pain in the last 10K, then it's much easier to keep committed and to get through to the finish and to try and fight on. But early on, if it's not going your way in the marathon, it's a long, long way to push your body in. Often we can see athletes doing lasting damage by trying to do that. So yes, the sensible thing if you're not feeling it at this point would be to step aside.
I mean, it would be extraordinarily early to step off the road, wouldn't it? With 20 minutes or so on the clock. They've been running for 23 minutes now. But actually, there is a point in the race at which you can step off and save your energy for another day, so to speak, which is probably what, up to about 25-30k, and then after 30k you're actually quite doing a little bit of long-lasting damage to your legs, aren't you, that will take weeks to recover from.
Yeah, I mean, that used to be the case, didn't it, with the shoes? They used to say that when you get to 20 miles, 30k, after that you're going to have damage to recover from. That's why the long runs would be more spaced out before. Now, one of the advantages of the shoe technology advances is that the long runs and the quality of the faster long runs can be put closer back to back in training, like a week or even maybe less, because the recovery is faster. So that does help the athletes also in terms of being able to get out and race more frequently over the full distance. Before, it might be 2, max 3 a year that would be sustainable. Now we see a lot of athletes able to do 3 or maybe more a year and still sustain that.
So not much lightening of the sky just yet. Just to remind you, if you've joined us in the last few minutes, it's only 6:25 here in Dubai, this glorious city by the sea. So it's early in the morning, no sun up yet, but the temperatures, the conditions generally for this 24th edition of the Dubai Marathon are absolutely perfect. Here's that lead men's pack. Big pack too, what, about 15 strong, something like that. It's a big men's field, by the way. We know there's an elite field of some 22 elite athletes here. But they are beginning to tank along rather nicely here. The 7th kilometre, if we were to believe these times, and I'm not sure I do, was a 2:46. The times at the moment that we've got coming through, although they went through in 15:04 at 5k, and I believe that, the times are all over the place.
And you can see the pacemakers are keen to keep the pace going behind them. Not too many athletes keen to go with it. I can see Tamru on the near side in the purple, same colour vest as the 2 pacemakers up in front, is keen to be up there. I think that is Desisa is also around in that lead group. Towards the back was the taller figure of Tolosa we talked about, stepping up from the mile 1500 meter distance to try and make a mark over the marathon. On the far side, that is Redahen as well, who is committing and then been up there quite a bit so far through this race in terms of keeping it going.
Yeah, Redahen in his 7th marathon here. His debut was in Cape Town back in 2021 when he ran 2:10. Really solid start. Then he ran a personal best in Barcelona in 2022 and was 11th in Frankfurt later that year. And then in extraordinarily in 2023 he ran 2 races in China 1 week apart. He ran 2:08 and then a week later he ran 2:10 in a couple of Chinese marathons back in 2023. Extraordinary way to behave, and I guess there are financial incentives. He probably woke up on the Monday morning, went, my legs don't feel too bad. Somebody said, oh, you know, there's another race this coming weekend. And he went, oh, okay, I'll have some of that. I mean, it is unbelievable. I didn't notice it at the time, but it's in his notes. 2 marathons, world-class times in 7 days.
Maybe he just really wasn't happy with the first one and wanted to go out and do better.
Well, he didn't. He ran slower in the second one. He
It's
only
going to
ran
be that
2:10.
way, isn't it, when you race a week later?
But he has shown good recent form, so we know he's got a good chance today. He's been in the top 5 in the top 3 in 5 of his 6 marathons, his finished marathons. This is his 7th. Back to this women's pack now. Talk about running in unison, in sync. That is a fantastic shot, isn't it?
A little bit of changing from the front, is there? Or is it not?
I'm not sure.
From the vest, I know that Welde, the debutant, was up front for so much of the first 5 kilometres, certainly keeping the pace, pushing along, but very little change there, and the women all working together, but one behind each other.
Well, according to the splits that are coming through, they've gone through 8K in 26:34, these leading women. The men almost exactly 2 minutes quicker at 8K, so that sounds about right. The men were 24:36 at 8K. That's 8th kilometre at 2:52, the 9th kilometre at 2:55. So these kilometre splits are beginning to come through with a bit more credibility to them now. I think they're homing in on what is correct timing. Still not sure, and can only apologise for the bizarre splits that were coming out earlier on, like the 6th kilometre according to the system at 3:54, the 5th kilometre at 2:03. Those are absolute rubbish, but now I think we're getting them right.
Certainly see that the pace has picked up, and that's why it's thinned out again a little bit. We're looking now at the women's pack, are we? Yes.
We've just had official confirmation there was a slight problem with some of the timing system through those early kilometres, but it is nailed down now. So splits from here on we think will be reliable. There's the Bayene in this leading women's group, Dibaba Bayene, making her debut, running with confidence up at the front there, tucked in behind the pacemakers. Ahmed as well, she's another debutante. That's Nuret Ahmed Samiro.
I think this is the second chase group. So I think it's the second group of women, it's not the first group of women, so that would be the 2:20 pace group that we were just looking at.
And here's the leading men's group. Move along really well, and I'm impressed. Kimetto is still there. Look, Dennis Kimetto. He's never done any track racing. He held the world record back in 2012 for 25K. 1 hour 11 minutes. He was on sub 2 hour tempo in that 25K for the 1 hour and a bit. But still looks very, very fit, Kimetto, 40 years old now. That world record he set back in 2014, 2:02:57. He was the first man ever to go under 2 hours and 3 minutes in the marathon, and he was a bit like a shooting star. He really only had a golden period of a couple of years, didn't he? But in that period he won Berlin and Tokyo and Chicago.
And he's struggled a lot with injuries since, and he talked about in the press conference, didn't he, that meant that he perhaps is a little bit fresher than he would have been had he been able to run through all that time without those injuries. And he was indicating that his training had shown him that he might be approaching form of 10 years or so ago, and he might be able to come out here and perform. So certainly, I think coming all this way, he wouldn't come all this way if he didn't think he was going to be able to perform, at least give himself a chance of hanging in there with that lead group. They're picking up their 10K bottles now in their hands.
They've just gone through 10K, that leading men's pack, in 29:49. So after a 15:04 first 5K, that was very, very modest, shall we say. The second 5K, 14:45 for that 29:49 at 10K. So they're beginning to click along now at a much, much quicker tempo. 14:45 works out at what, 2:57 per kilometre. So that is almost exactly right. 2:04 pace is 2:56.5 per kilometre. Now I know it may sound a bit strange to some of you who are not used to marathon racing for us to be talking about seconds and half seconds, but cumulatively over 42K, Paula, it matters. Did you ever have a situation in a race where you heard a split and you think, oh crikey, I've really put my foot down too much there, I've gone too quick, or conversely, that was a really slow split, I'd better pick it up? Yeah,
I mean, I think those are the gauges that you look to, aren't they? And I remember, well, I know that the third mile in London is downhill slightly, so that's always a panic. But one year they had set the marker out in a little bit the wrong place, so when I went through it, it was an extremely quick mile, and then it's kind of riding that line of not panicking too much because it's done, there's nothing you can do about it. So if you waste a lot of energy stressing about it, it's not going to help your race in any way, but certainly scaling it back and just slowing down a little bit and trying to gauge that correctly as well. And it's more the slower ones that will give you a bit of a psychological kick up the bum, get moving a little bit and try and pull yourself out of those rough patches. But I think accepting that in the marathon as well, it's a tough event and you're not going to get through it without some tough miles, and so a couple you can let go. It's when they start to go back to back that you need to start pulling things together and working it out.
Well, that 29.49 puts them on a tempo of just inside 2:06. So they are homing in on a nice steady rhythm here that is could result in a very quick time. I suspect they will continue to push it along really strongly through halfway and beyond, and hopefully well towards the finish line with a winning time, maybe around 2:04, 2:05 here today. Remember that course record 2:03.34 is very special indeed. That day Gaetano Molla ran a first half of 61.44, so today we were hoping this lead pack would go out in about 62 minutes. If they pick it up as they go past the 11k marker with 32.55 on the clock, then we might get something down there around the 2:04, 2:05 area. I think a course record would take something very, very special indeed. That's the lead women going over a timing map.
That might be 10k. It is 10k.
That's the 10k for them, about 33.12 there for the leading women, give or take a second.
There you go, 33.05.
33.05. Well, that's weird, isn't it? Because we started our stopwatches when the gun went, and
So
mine said 33.12.
But the women did start a little bit behind, didn't they?
No.
Stood on the second row on the start.
Well, all right. Half a second behind. They're not going to start 50 metres back. We'll check that for you. 33.07 is no, that's the men at 11k. Crikey, how just to confuse you. At 10k, the women have gone through in 33.05. It is indeed 33.05.
There's an issue there. Who's that? Mulu didn't get her bottle, I think, at that, and she's. Well, she looks as though she's gesturing to be handed one. I'm not sure they can do that. You have to pick up your aid bottle, your drinks bottle within the zone, and she has now gone past that 11th table, so nobody else can bring her one other than one of the other runners. One of the other runners could send that forward and share her drinks bottle, and it does sometimes happen, particularly if she's got a training partner in there who might take pity and share that bottle with her. I think that's just maybe not perhaps being aware of those drinks tables coming up, and as I said, they did in the technical meeting spend a long time explaining to the athletes in which position on which table your bottle would be, and make sure that you allow the time to get there. It is spread out over 100 meters or so, and so if you're on one of the later tables you have an advantage in terms of knowing that it's coming up.
So that second 5k for the women after a 16.36 opener was 16.29. And the good news is that 10k split for the women, 33.05, puts them on schedule for about 2:19.30. They're on sub 2:20 tempo in the women's race, and in the men's race on sub 2:06 tempo. So things building nicely with 35 minutes on the clock here in Dubai.
And you can definitely see from that shot the cadence has picked up a little bit. They're ticking along really, really well there, aren't they, in that group? Some looking around, just assessing who else is there, who's with me. And as you said, Kimetto is still up there, still acquitting himself well so far.
Well, he is, you know, and I was looking at Kimetto's card. His last significant marathon was back in 2016 when he was 9th in London. He ran 2:11. But he hasn't been in competitive shape for an international race for a long time. I mean, you know, anything outside 2:10, 2:12 for him is really when it's gone.
Yeah.
And he's just enjoying his running as a veteran runner.
But no, certainly a lot faster at this pace than his last run out. Well, his last run out in 2024 was a 2:34 in Lagos, and running much faster than that, but still with a lot of company around him and a lot of racing to go yet today.
There you can see those splits: 15:03 for the first 5k, and then 14:44 for the second 5k. So a big acceleration there. I wonder why that first 5k was so slow. The pacemakers maybe not quite dialing into the right tempo, and then they probably got a reminder as they went through 5k of exactly what sort of pace they need to be moving at. There's the Burj Al Arab in the background, one of the most famous structures in the world. That 27k mark is a rider picture, of course, is for later in the race, but the Burj Al Arab that gets passed 4 times by these athletes. Very strict on the filming rules around the Burj Al Arab. We had to make sure we didn't go too close to it on Friday when we filmed 1 or 2 clips for this coverage. Still not been in there. Still not been in there for a glass of lemonade or anything stronger.
Or maybe they'll invite you in at the end.
It is. Well, it's so futuristic. I mean, how many years has it been there? 25 years or something? It looks like
Yes.
it's a design from the future.
I actually little date it. I came here to celebrate my 30th birthday.
Well, that's a long time ago.
I know, it was a long, long time ago, 21 years ago, there you go. And it was fairly new then, and we did kind of sneak in just for a nosy around. So I've been in it.
You have been in it. Okay, it's obviously made to look like a ship's sail. That's what's beautiful about it. It's so appropriate alongside the Gulf there. The last kilometre, 3:23. That's again just not to be believed for these elite men. Predicted race time 2:8:19. Well, again, I've got a very nice table here. I've had for years. It's falling to bits, but a piece of paper with a great table on it, and I can tell you they're on about 2:05:50 tempo. The men, they were at 10k in any case. They've been running now for 38 minutes, so we're not going to get the 15k split for another 5-6 minutes yet.
But you can see the pack has bunched up a little bit, which does perhaps indicate it's eased up a little, but I do think that split is perhaps, again, not for this group of racing. What happens when the pace does yo-yo, it does make it harder to race at that pace. To settle into a rhythm, certainly at this stage in the marathon, is a far easier way to run than when the pace is surging and then dropping back, and that is a good way to test out your rivals, and it's a good way to sap the strength of your rivals in a racing condition. So maybe more in a championship race, but in a race like today, when yes, of course they're trying to win the race, but they're also trying to run quick times, it's easier to run more evenly. This is now back to is this chase group for the women? No, this is the front
lead group,
I think,
isn't it? Yeah. Tigist Garma is there in the green in between these two male pacemakers, Bahailu and Bultume. And of course it helped that they're Ethiopian as well, because if needs be she can give them a little shout in Amharic, in their common language, and say, pick it up fellas, or can you push it along, or even, can you slow down a little bit, please?
I think more than that, I think they're used to training with the men that are pacing for them, so they're used to settling in behind and focusing on the back or the heels of the athlete in front. You can see certainly Bahailu there is doing a good job of looking across, talking, checking, making sure that he's doing exactly what's required in his job here. Deradida is still in there.
Bultume doing a good job. Now, of course, the one advantage the women have when they have male pacemakers in what is, of course, a mixed race, is that those male pacemakers can take them the whole way, can take the leader all the way to the finish line. That's never the case in a men's race for obvious reasons. A pacemaker, some races allow pacemakers to finish the race, but I can't remember the last time a pacemaker won a race in the last 25 years, although they have sometimes competed for the win. But pacemakers in some races are allowed to finish the race, and they will do the pacemaking job up to 25k, 30k if they have a great day, and then continue. Very tough, and it's a controversial issue, Paul. I'm not a huge fan of it. I think pacemakers in all races should have to drop out by 30k and then let the racing take place.
Yeah, I mean, wasn't there a situation when Paul Tergat set the world record?
And he got raced against,
he was still racing, approaching the Brandenburg Gate.
But I remember an incident in Chicago years ago where the leading woman had got broken away on her own, and a pacemaker was staying with her and helping her, and there were 5-7 kilometers to go, and the woman in second place was maybe 100 meters back, didn't have anybody helping her, and therefore was at a disadvantage. Now, you know, once you're in the last 5, 7, 8k, you should let the race unfold in a natural way, and pacemakers should step aside. Otherwise it becomes a very uneven playing field. If a leading athlete has a pacemaker with them, or a chasing athlete has a personal pacemaker, and other athletes around them they're competing against don't have that same help, well, very clearly it's not an even playing field.
Yeah, no, it's racing out there, isn't it? And too much distance, too much replication of training doesn't give us an exciting race to watch.
Well, the men's splits have gone back to being slightly weird, as we see this. Is this the leading women's group? Yes, two pacemakers, they're Bultume and Bahailu.
Yeah, and there There's Welday still up there, so on her debut. Remember, she does have a 67, I think it's 67.44 half marathon best, so certainly has the pedigree to step up. Although having said that, if you're looking on paper going through halfway in 68 and your personal best is 15 seconds or so in front of that, and that can be a daunting task in your debut. So she's perhaps a little bit relieved that they've gone out a tad slower than that.
Well, now the sun, or the sky, is beginning to brighten. The sun will be up soon. It's quarter to 7, nearly quarter to 7 local time in Dubai. This big men's pack, quite a contrast to the women's field, which is split into 2 separate packs, and there's, what, 4 or 5 in the leading women's pack. This men's pack, probably 15 or 17 strong. 43 minutes on the clock, the sun coming up over the Gulf.
Back to the women's, is the chase group. I did see in that previous shot there was a bigger group of women that had worked their way back onto that lead group of women. There wasn't too much difference. Difficult to tell in that shot, other than the fact that the light is coming up. There we go. In that shot you can see the 2 packs are starting to get closer to each other.
Now, is that because the lead group has slowed, or the chasing group have picked it up? I suspect the former.
Potentially a mix of both, a little bit. The lead group might have slowed a little, and then the second group have worked their way into it a little bit as well.
Well, Welday in this lead group you mentioned, Paula, you said good half marathon runner. Just at Herzogenaurach in Germany. Her sponsors put on a big race every April, and she ran really fast half marathon. In fact, a world under 20 record of 67.44 less than 2 years ago. So enormous capability shown at half marathon. She's also very high standard track runner as well at 5,000 and 10,000. And so I like that. I like athletes who have done their apprenticeship, so to speak. I like athletes who have raced on the track, shown their credibility at 3,000, 5,000, 10,000, then at half marathon, and then they step up to the marathon with the right sort of work having been done. And it makes you a more complete marathon racer.
It does, and I think the World Cross Country as well, for her 7th place in the World Cross Country, that is a really strong indicator for a strong marathon. I think if you can race well on the cross country, particularly at World Cross level, you can translate that mentally and psychologically as well as physically to racing the marathon. You're better in tune with your body, engaging the effort over a course rather than over a set exact distance of, say, 10 kilometers. To race the World Cross Country, you've got to be able to tune into your body, and you have to be able to do that in the marathon in terms of knowing where that line is. If I go faster than that, I'm not going to be able to sustain this pace and race well to the end. But this is the point where I can push as hard as I can and keep that going right through to the end of the race.
Well, the men have gone through 15k in 44.38. That third 5k 14.49. So they've gone 15.03, 14.44, 14.49, and still keeping it at a very, very healthy tempo. That men's race at the front end, 44.38 at 15k. Just checking on our maps what that gives them. It puts them on 2:05.30 tempo. Welday.
Just a little bit of a break up. I think she's actually just moved over to one side of the road, slotting in behind the pacemaker, and there isn't a huge substantial gap at the moment to the rest of the women's field. Yeah, there's the rest of the women's field, so it was a little bit deceptive, that angle. I thought there was a breakaway for a little bit. It was just a fragmenting out, spreading out across the road, perhaps aware that they're not too far away from the next drink station, and making sure that in the right position to get it right and pick up all the bottles this time.
It is beginning to get a little bit more serious though, isn't it? I mean, I suppose from now, you know, 3/4 of an hour on the clock, 45, 46 minutes on the clock, this is where people have to start focusing a little bit more. They're not cruising with quite such ease. And when you run your fastest times, Paula, can you remember getting to halfway and any of them thinking, God, this is easy. I feel really good here. Or were you always aware you were beginning to work a bit at halfway?
I don't think it ever feels easy at halfway, but I think what you aim to do is be able to get there and think, okay, now I can kind of step it up and put it up one more gear. So you're already working hard, but you want to have another gear to move up to in the second half, ideally. And I certainly, I think I was perhaps lucky in that my first marathon was a negative split, and I realised that that was the easier way to run it, and then tried to replicate that as far as possible in other races.
Do you think that's good advice for almost all marathon runners, whether they're 3, 4, 5 hour marathon runners or slower, to get to their sort of goal should be to get to halfway feeling pretty good and feeling you haven't overextended yourself, and then the second half you can run with a little bit more optimism and positivity, so to speak, aggression almost?
Yeah, I think certainly when you get into the last 10, 12k, then you can really let go and kind of put everything into it. Before that, if you really feel like you're pushing, it's very hard to sustain that all the way. So I think absolutely get maybe a little bit past halfway and then start pushing on a little bit more and pouring more of what you've got left into the race. Often you can make up far more in the final 10k than you're ever going to be able to get a buffer and build up in the first 10k by running faster. So better to save that quicker running for the end. And as I said, certainly it's a more pleasant way to run. You're not battling those psychological demons in quite the same way as if you really go out hard and try and hold on. That's a painful way to run a marathon.
So Kiptu at the front end of this men's field, 48 minutes on the clock there. Just to update you, if you've joined us in the last few minutes, they went through 10k in 29:49. That was give them a finishing time of just inside 2:06. Well, they've maintained a good steady tempo now through the 15k, 44:38. That was a 14:49 5k, and it puts them on tempo of about 2:05:30. So they're warming to the task, I think you could say, Paula. And you know, if the 20k split comes up with another time quite a long way under 15 minutes for 5k, they'll be heading down towards 2:05 flat territory, and hopefully through the second half, as you say, negative splits would take them down into the 2:04s.
Well, certainly they're setting that stall out like that, aren't they? We've seen a gradual, nothing silly, but a gradual wind up of the pace from a steady start, and now starting to settle into good rhythm. We're seeing little tiny gaps start to break up, but most of the main contenders are still in there, and it's a very, very strong pack. And indeed on the women's side, they've gone through now 15 kilometers, because that is the 15k drink station. 49:36 is the split that has come up, so they are also starting to pick up. They've set out quickly, it's backed off a little bit, and that is now dropped again below 2:20 pace for the predicted time. You still can see that chase group in the background as well, not too far behind, maybe 100 meters if that. The lens does foreshorten that gap a little bit, but some strong running and some strong racing yet to come, certainly on this women's side. This time they've all got their bottles safely.
They have. Did you used to practice that, Paul, as we see that 15k split being confirmed at 49:36? Did you used to practice grabbing your drinks on training runs, and possibly more importantly, getting used to drinking on training runs and having liquid sloshing around in your stomach?
Absolutely, you've hit the nail on the head there. It's not only picking up the bottle, because for elite athletes the bottle is much easier. For many of the mass runners out there, picking up a cup is one of the hardest things, and huge amount of admiration for people that manage to do that and still get all of the liquid inside them. To pick up the bottle is not so hard, but to drink at pace, as these women are doing here, is more difficult, and it is something that you have to practice, because you need to get that fuel into you. So you have to practice being able to run at speed. So that means practicing not so much on your long runs, but on your tempo runs, when you're really hitting that marathon pace and getting the drink into you, and trying to master the technique of running with it for a little bit as well, just to make sure that you're getting as much of that fuel into your body, certainly in these earlier stages, but the more the race goes on, that becomes important as well too. It's not so much for hydration, it really is for that energy and that fuel into your body.
Well, I have to say that Kiptu here doing a fantastic job, as they've got over 51 minutes on the clock now. Saila Kiptu looking like every bit An experienced pacemaker, almost single file. I think he has picked it up maybe a little bit. I don't know if they're getting information from the sidelines. There are one or two of the attendees of the elite athletes on the lead motorbikes close to them who could be shouting instructions at them, maybe screaming, pick it up a bit, that last 5k too slow, or maybe slow down a little bit, but they really are motoring now. I think I just sense that stride length has lengthened a little bit. There's a pickup in the cadence, actually, how quickly the legs are turning over.
Yeah, well, you can definitely see that. I'm just trying to see if the second pacemaker is still in there, but certainly on the front of that lead bike, we talked about writing the splits down your arm. Michel, who sat on the back of that lead bike, does have the splits all over him, so doesn't he's written all over. So that is his job to make sure that he gets that information to the pacemakers and that they do keep that pace going as requested and as is wanted by the men who've spent a lot of time behind training for this race. So we do want to come here and make sure that that is executed as it should be, and they can essentially slot in certainly for the first half and not worry too much about the pace, just worry about following the pacemaker, because that is his job to set that pace. And there is Richard Whitehead to the right in the right hand side picture there, preparing for his 81st marathon. He's trying to hit 100 over a 20-year career, and he's still trying to challenge his personal best, which I think is really impressive.
Well, Richard spoke at the athletes' press conference yesterday, the technical meeting, I should say. A real inspiration, born without legs, Richard Whitehead, but has met that challenge in life head on. And as Paula said, this is his 81st marathon. And what you didn't say is that he wants to do 20 this year, to get to the 100 by the end of this year. I'm not quite sure why. I didn't really say why that was so significant this year. But anyway, I think he wants to get it out of the way.
I think
but he's doing a marathon roughly every 2 weeks.
Yeah, a lot of time away from his family. So I think he's signing off on that 100 and then might just take a step back a little bit. But a huge amount of time he's been running at the top level and extremely consistent in the pace that he can run through at.
Well, there's Welday, Paula. She's only 20 years old, born in May 2004, excuse me. Wishful thinking there on my part. It makes me feel so old when I see world-class athletes born after 2000. She was fourth in the World Junior Championships on the track over 3,000 meters as recently as 2022, and then seventh in the World Cross Country in Belgrade in March last year. You and I were there, and on a flat, fast course, more suited to the road races almost. So, but anything like top 10 in the World Cross Country is fabulous form, isn't it?
It is, and I think that's a really important mark, almost as important as her 67.44 coming into this in terms of setting up her pedigree and potential over the marathon distance. And I think more than that as well, she's not been in awe in any way in this race, has she? She's been very, very keen to get in behind the pacemaker, to get herself up at the front there. She's not taking the time to learn, and she's not really showing any fear of this distance, and she's getting in there and racing as she, I would guess, has been training, and training indicates you can get out there and run fast, go out there and do that. And certainly, as you mentioned before, the cadence of this men's group from that angle has picked up, and it is very impressive at the moment. You can see the field thinning out again. It's bunched up a couple of times and then thinned again, hasn't it? And that is an indication that the pace is yo-yoing a little bit, but it's starting to sift through, and the main contenders that we're going to see through the second half of this race starting to come to the fore.
Well, the 18th kilometre for the men at 2:53, so that is down around 2:03 tempo. They are shifting now as they approach halfway. It looks like the men have accelerated. Welday here looking fabulous, isn't she? Maybe the Ethiopians discovered another star here, Paula. And what struck me when I was in Addis Ababa, in the Ethiopian capital 18 months or so ago, I went to the big training track where they all turn up early in the morning, about 7:30, and there were dozens and dozens of them doing big training session at 7:30 in the morning on this track. And I thought, wow, this is going to turn out world-class runners on an industrial scale. I mean, it is so intimidating, where, you know, in Europe people have got a few little groups, but most people are doing it in individuals. In North America, which is the best non-African distance running country, there are big squads sponsored by shoe companies and so on, but there is nothing that comes close to what I witnessed in Addis Ababa. It was awe-inspiring and a little worrying almost, because they're going to dominate with that system. They're going to dominate for the foreseeable future.
Well, it's the base of the pyramid is so big, isn't it? And it's the national sport. So rather than wanting to be a soccer player, football player, they want to be a runner. They want to be the next Mirat Sifta, Abebe Bikila, Kenenisa Bikila, Haile Gebrselassie. And there's a huge amount of athletes coming in at the base of that pyramid. So of course you're going to lose some through injury and overtraining, but there will still be a huge amount. It's like a production line coming through, and I think that is what is so impressive when you see those groups coming together. Just in the second of the women, Yima, the neighbour Yima, is also looking really, really strong and composed in that group.
Well, the men's 19th kilometre, after the 18th in 2:53, we said it looked like they were picking it up. That 19th kilometre, 2:50. So if that is to be believed, wow, they are flying, and they are going to go through halfway in something like 62 minutes, which was the target, but they've done it in a strange manner. I think the early 5K was on the slow side, and then it has gradually picked up. Now here's that U-turn, 58 minutes on the clock, so this is at about 19 kilometers, and they are down by the Burj Al Arab here. Just checking. No, they're not. They're at the northern point. Excuse me, I've got it wrong. Burj Al Arab is way down in the distance there, as you see down the road. 7K down there, about 4.5 miles down there is the Burj Al Arab. This is the U-turn, the second U-turn of the race. So they've just run about a 10K length, dead straight, with a slight dog leg near the Burj Al Arab. It's a chasing group in the men's race. That wasn't Kimetto, was it? Was that Kimetto leading that trio? I think it was. Tolosa. Well, he's beginning to struggle. Teresa Tolosa making his debut. He's a great track racer. He's a 3:34 1500-meter runner. He was a silver medalist in the World Junior 1500 meters back in 2016. But he did run a 61:29 half marathon in Warsaw a couple of years ago. So he's got distance runner's strength, but maybe not marathon runner's strength. And he's finding out.
Yeah, as we see a little bit, somebody there did not realise that they were approaching that drinks table, and some zigzagging around, almost got caught up in the table, as well as we look at pictures on the other side of the mass race getting ready to get underway in about 30 seconds or so.
Yeah, the elite athletes set off at 6 a.m. This marathon mass start at 7 a.m. and then the 10K will go off at 8:15 and the 4K fun run at 10:30 local time. Nearly 1 hour on the clock then in the men's race, and appropriately this mass marathon gets underway exactly an hour after the elite athletes in the 24th edition of the Dubai Marathon. It is the 26 years since the first Dubai Marathon. There were no marathons here in Dubai in 2021 or 2022 because of the pandemic, but it is back now. Marathon racing all over the world is back big time, and numbers continue to go up. The New York Marathon last November was the biggest marathon ever in numbers. I think it was 47,000, was it? Or was it 45,000? It doesn't matter. Sorry, 55. It was well north of 50,000, which is astonishing. Dubai's not that big yet, but those look like great numbers.
It does, and it's great to see so many locals and so many people travelling as well to come here and take part in this race and kind of experience a little bit of what the elite athletes get in terms of a great organisation and a really fast course here, breaking up that winter back home as well to come and race in warmer conditions is conducive to fast times, and building in towards hopefully a fair number trying to qualify as well for events like with time qualifiers. Big marathon majors, and often there's a time qualifier needed to get into those.
Well, many of these athletes will be running for charity, many others just with their own personal goals and ambitions and motivations. Great to see. It's well known that if there's a marathon runner or a runner in the family, that other members of the family improve their lifestyles. There's all sorts of data to support this. One member of the family takes up running, and other members of the family improve their lifestyles, their diet, their sleep patterns, maybe their choice to get involved in aerobic exercise. So wonderful to see that So many people are enjoying a run out early on this Sunday morning. Remember, only 7 a.m. Well, now about 2 minutes past 7 a.m. here in Dubai for this 24th edition of the race. Now, in the elite men's race, look at that single file, Paula. They're really running hard here, and that's because they've gone through 20k in 59.11. That split, a 5k split to 20k, 14:33. They've accelerated very, very significantly. In the last 10k, let's take a look at that. The last 10k has been, what, about just outside 29 minutes.
Really, really fast, and you can see the effect that it's having down the field. They're almost flat out at this point and running really, really hard. Maybe as the halfway checkpoint, they've just gone over there on the mats, but certainly a huge pickup in pace, and that's having a detrimental effect on the field in terms of really thinning it out into single file behind them, working hard. On the women's race, it's still consistently that group, although it does look like Tahir towards the back is struggling to hold on, and for the first time Yima is slipping back down that field as well. So there are 6 women in that group, but 5 starting to break away a little bit, and still Welder at the front keeping that pace going and slotted in right behind the pacemaker.
Well, that last 10k in 29.22 is 2:03 tempo, 2:03.30 tempo. So they've actually run the last 10k at race record speed. They are 62.23 at the half. That is not bad at all. That is pretty much spot on, considering the first 5k was 15-20 seconds slower than they wanted. That is brilliant pacing.
It is, and it's quick. I mean, looking at Girma slotted into second place behind the pacemaker, so first place really at the moment in the race. Not a huge amount of experience, a 63.34 at altitude. He's just run a substantial personal best, albeit at sea level, through the first half of this race, and then trying to come back with a racing second half is a big ask. So a lot of men up there committing to this, which is great to see, and I've obviously trained well over the winter and come here expecting to get a fast race, and maybe when it went out a little bit slower, we're keen to get that pace moving. But now they've got it moving, and they are really on a very good tempo, personal best tempo for many of those men.
Well, one of those leading men is Edmilam Tedeschi-Casa. He's making his debut here. He's gone out in 62.23. He's either going to make a spectacular debut when they come to the finish line, or else he's going to blow up in the second half. And maybe the women have picked up too, Paula, because single file here, you know, nobody's running alongside each other and feeling comfortable.
This is a second group of women, so if we get that camera just swung around a little bit, we could see how far they are behind from that lead group. That is the second chase group. That lead group is the 6 women who were away that we saw, led by Welder. Kiptu is still doing a strong job here as a pacemaker. He's gone through halfway. We've lost the other pacemaker. He's doing a very good job and keeping that pace going.
And Berega here, likewise doing a fabulous job. Ahmed tucked in behind. Bayene is there as well. They make that turn at, what, about 19.5 kilometers. That's that northernmost point of the circuit, and they'll be back here in 14 kilometers time. So basically they're on like a very long, elongated running track here with 7 kilometers on each side, and they do a U-turn at each end.
So it is the 1K splits that we're getting are just an indicator. The 5K splits are the ones that will be so much more accurate. So that should be coming up soon for the lead women. This again is that chase group of women approaching the 20K mark. For the lead women, they did go through that in 65.40. So now working towards the lead group ahead of this group. This is the chase group, and the lead group through 65.40. That would give them what, around about 68-69 minutes, so a little bit of a picking up of that, approaching the halfway mark.
Yeah, 65.40, just checking on the old trusty chart. 65.40 would bring them home in 2:18.32, so they have wound up. Funny, isn't it? Both races have sort of picked it up around 15k to 20k. Well, that's because I'm not sure why that would be. perhaps there's just been more information getting through to the pacemakers, and they've picked it up a little bit. But both races seem to have accelerated around the 15k mark, and are now heading down toward very, very quick times here in Dubai on this rather lovely Sunday morning. Tables here. Do you know what? When it was explained at the technical meeting yesterday that these drinks tables would be spread out over 120 meters, I thought, what a good idea. There's less chance of getting it wrong. You know, so many marathons, you see too many bottles on a table, and then another 5 meters along, another table with 6 or 8 bottles on it, and you think, no wonder people knock the bottles off, or they don't get them, or people fall over, and you get chaos. It's a brilliant way of thinking here, and it's the first time I've seen it at any marathon. I don't think it's been the same in the past here in Dubai. Pete Connaughton will have to forgive me if it has been, but spreading those drink tables out for the elite athletes, always on the left, over a long, long stretch, over 100 meters, is the way to do it.
It is, because it's one of the biggest jeopardies in marathon racing, isn't it? Particularly in championship racing, is trying to get to your table, get your bottle, the amount of mishaps that we've had happen there. So making that a little bit easier for the athletes. I mean, there are some races that actually send people out on bikes to hand them at the right zones and times, but certainly spreading it out like that is a really safe way to do it.
Well, Herpa, Bedatu Herpa, one of my favourites here, is tucked in there behind Bayene, the Welde rather, the debutante. Herpa to the centre of picture there in the purple, just gone out of shot to the right of picture. Winner of Prague back in May last year in 2:23. She won in Riyadh in Saudi in 2:27, then she won in Prague 3 months later in 2:23, and then she was 5th in Amsterdam in a personal best of 2:21. She had an incredible 2024.
It was really, really strong, and she's slotted in behind Tigist Girma in the green ahead of her, and then Deradida, champion a couple of years ago and 3rd place last year, and then Yima is further back. She was 4th and 5th at the World Half Marathon in 2020 and 2018 respectively. Does have that 2:19.07 personal best and a 65:46 personal best from RAC a few years ago over the half marathon distance as well.
69:12 at the half for the leading women. It's been set up beautifully here by the pacemakers, doing a wonderful job. My only reservation about Herpa, who you can see on that list, is up in the top 5 or 6 places, and I've scribbled it in my notes, Paula. This is her 4th marathon in less than 11 months, and that means she could be running on tired legs. Now, quite often, and you know this, that results in you looking great for 2/3 of the race, and then that fatigue begins when you have to start digging deep and go to the well again. You look down into the well, and the water's a long, long way down, and the well's more or less empty.
It gets tougher, doesn't it? The only thing I will say is that she has run second, when she's run them close together, she has run the latter one at a slightly slower pace. So she did in Riyadh, she ran 2:27, didn't she? Which for her is almost like a long run in training put into a race situation. So she might be able to come back from that okay, but yeah.
Well, she got faster with each of her marathons last year. She won Riyadh in February in 2:27. She won Prague in May in 2:23, and then she ran Amsterdam, which is always in the autumn. I think it's in October, in 2:21. So, I mean, it's an astonishing year. As she was meant to be getting more tired, she was getting faster.
But building up, as I said, she's building those in as training, isn't she? And being able to,
doing
to
marathons
build off
as a
of it.
training run.
Maybe that's what she was doing in Riyadh. Just kind of getting
Did you
a
ever
feel
do that?
for
Run
it.
a marathon as a training run?
No. I did a lot of training that was not quite marathon distance, and then went into the marathons
What
and
were
raced
your
them.
longest training runs?
It would only be about 23.5 miles, and I would
Only
do.
23.5
Yeah,
miles.
I wouldn't
Well, that's
go
nearly
further
a
than that.
marathon.
I know, but I wouldn't go further than that.
But that's 35k or something, 36k.
But there would only be a couple of those. The other one, I would build up to that as the highest
What would be your norm
point.
on a Sunday? Sort of 25k?
I didn't do it on a
28K?
Sunday. I did it every 8 days for my
Okay.
long run was the closest that I could, but so it rotated the days that it would be on. And I would start out, I'd try and aim for a couple, like I did it more to time, so there would be, I'd do a substantial amount, 2 hours and over, but only a couple at like the longest of those runs.
Well, the story of the men's race was on the top left of your screen just now. The 5K splits. They went out in 15:03. The first 5K was misjudged. It was way too slow. But then the pacemakers dialed into the right tempo, and they ran 14:44 for the second 5K, 14:48 for the third 5K, 14:32 for that fourth 5K. Now, that is so fast, Paula. It almost makes me think, while the first 5K was much too slow, the fourth 5K is quite a lot too fast. That is really flying. They went through halfway, remember, the men in 62:23, so quick-ish, but only by dint of some very, very uneven splits.
And we do have a lot of debutants in this race as well, so maybe there is a little bit of getting a bit excited too soon in this race, and that certainly indicates, if the splits are accurate, that it's a little bit too much quick running, perhaps too soon in this race. But time will tell. They might be able to still get faster and build from that.
69:12 for the women. That is fantastic, isn't it? Right on tempo. If they run negative splits now, they will go below 2:18. They're almost on exactly 2:18 tempo at the moment with 69:12. Wonder how many of them will survive the second half. Did you ever run a race where you had people around you at halfway and you thought, just wait, you guys, wait till it really counts? You know, what do they say? I mean, I remember Brendan Foster, who was never an established marathon runner, but he was a wonderfully experienced distance runner. He used to say a marathon, the racing begins at about 20 miles. In fact, I think he said halfway is 20 miles.
That's the old saying, isn't it, for the marathon? Halfway is 20 miles.
Or 30k-ish.
The real racing starts from there. So yeah, I mean, a lot of times you'd go through halfway still in a big pack, and indeed, when I set the first world record in Chicago in 2002, I was racing the existing world record holder, the current world record holder at the time, in Catherine Dereba, and we were still very much locked together at halfway. And then it was not so much about trying to run fast, but about trying to win the race. It just so happened that perhaps our best tactic for winning the race was by running quickly.
Well, there they go. Is that the 25k map? Oh, juggling with a bottle, and it goes down there. Who was that trying to grab a bottle? To the right of that group. Oh, he tried so hard. He was like, in fact, he was smiling, I think, because he was juggling with it. It was bouncing around on his hand. Oh dear. Kiptu's still at the front. Hailu is still there.
Was it Toulouse?
I hope it wasn't Toulouse, one of the favourites.
He has a bottle now. He does have a bottle in his hand. He did kind of
to
throw
see
it in the air a little bit, didn't
Watch
it? There
that.
we go.
Right a picture, grabs a bottle. Whoops, whoops, skip, bouncing around. Look at this, it's juggling. I mean, it's like a circus act. Oh, down it goes. That is so unlucky. So unlucky. Tried desperately. Knocks over that one as well. Oh, he gets one eventually.
He did get one, but it's not his though, is it then?
What
So
is it?
he's taken one, somebody else has thrown it around, or taken his and thrown it around, then tried to pick it, then knocked someone else's down, and now has someone else's in his hand. So some of the runners coming behind now will not get a bottle.
Ouch. That's sad to see. Well, they've gone through there. I think
Was
the
it him or was
25
it
came out.
Tamru?
We won't apportion the blame until we can absolutely identify the athlete. And then, of course, no, these guys are... I think we tend to forget very often, too, that these fellas are mortal. They are... We treat them like machines sometimes, so we have expectations of them being machines sometimes too often, but they're human beings just like you and I in some respects. 25k there, look, 14:38, that last 5k.
It was Segu, I think, who did that, who is actually returning from a 4-year doping ban. Does have extremely good pedigree and time to his name, but I'm not sure if that's grounds for disqualification if you take someone else's bottle. It's certainly not sporting, because certainly at that point, 25k, and you're coming along expecting to find your bottle on the table, and it's not there. It's a bit of a panic situation, and it's not conducive to a good race when you are hitting 25k and not getting the fueling that you want.
No, absolutely. So 1 hour 16 on the clock then in this 24th edition of the Dubai Marathon. If you just joined us in the last few minutes, the leading men's group got to halfway in 62:23. The leading women got to halfway in 69:12. Both races almost on exactly the requested pre-race tempo from the pacemakers, are doing a very good job. The sun is up, although it's still a lovely cool morning. Perfect marathon conditions, 17 minutes past 7 as you watch us now. Paula, do you still get an inkling? Would you still love to be out there?
Oh, running at this pace, I don't think I'd be anywhere close to them now.
You know what I'm asking. Are you missing it?
Well, I'm going to be racing. Well, racing. I'm going to be running a couple
slip.
of marathons. I know later in the year, and yeah, I know that I can't go anywhere close to what I used to before. But being a part of that atmosphere, I think, is what the draw is now, because it's that camaraderie, it's that marathon spirit that is very difficult. You can still go out for a run now, but it's hard to beat that spirit out there. And racing hard and running hard at the front is not something I'm going to do anymore, but being a part of the ambience is something that I can be. As the sun comes up around the Jumeirah Beach Road, and these women will be just approaching the Jumeirah Hotel that the men just ran past a couple of seconds ago.
There it is, the leader of men. They're coming down towards the U-turn, down towards what is effectively the centre junction of the course at the southern end of this long 7K strip of road on Jumeirah Beach Road. Did some filming there a couple of days ago. There is that glorious structure. And this is where they will make the turn and head back out for the final time, heading northwards, which is behind them now.
So we'll listen out. I don't think they get a bell, do they, as they make this turn?
A bell?
But effectively, it is the last lap for them in their heads.
1:13.50 at 25K. That last 5K was a 14:38. So, yeah, they have really picked up. The last 3 5K splits have been 14:49, 14:33, 14:38. They are flying, and it's still a big pack. And that's a good indicator, Paula, that there's a few fellas in there whose legs are going to survive the journey. There'll be 1 or 2 who will, the wheels will come off, as we put it. They will really struggle this last third of the race, because there's about a third to go. And some of them will survive it well. Kiptu has done a fabulous job. Just what you want to see from a pacemaker, staying at the front, thinking on his feet, checking his watch.
Doing a very, very good job, and I think what we're going to see now is like a shuffling, a sifting of that pack, and we're going to see men start to drop off, and we will see someone perhaps who's been biding their time, who's been sitting towards the back of this group, start to come through, or it may indeed be one of those like Deriba, who's been at the front, running tall, running strong all the way through this race so far, and is certainly showing himself to be in good form up to this point. And this is where it does start to bite, and this is where you need to have that training in your legs, you need to have that mind strength and psychological strength as well to stay strong once you get past 30K.
Well, this big men's pack that we've talked about, who have now gone through 25K, includes Deslen Gurma, Salih Kiptu as pacemaking, Berahanu Segu, Dejeni Hailu, Ute Gemechu, Getaju Masresha, Boki Deriba, who was one of my dark horses in this race, Delisa Bultisa, Edmilam Kassa, he's one of the debutants, Shifera Tamru. There's some exciting racing and some exciting debuts unfolding out there in Dubai this morning. And in the women's race, well, the leaders include Bertakan Welde, she's a debutante, Tigist, and Dera Dida, of course, very experienced. Badatu Herpa, who's experienced. Aniba Yima, she is amongst the absolute favourites. That was at halfway in the women's race. And Nurit Ahmed as well, who is also a debutante. Welde looking really strong there in the purple. Really powerful, long, purposeful stride. Strange arm carriage, really high arm carriage. They're right up close to her shoulders, her hands hardly moving down to the side of her body at all. Of her body at all. 1 hour 20 on the clocks. They've got, what, less than an hour to run, I would say, the leading women. But who is it going to be who unfolds as the eventual winner?
She has been locked in that position for the majority of the race so far. Welde has been very keen to get right up behind the pacemaker, to go with that pace and commit to it early on and stick with it. The other women happy to shuffle a little bit behind her in terms of position-wise, and there's been some chopping and changing. Tigist Girma in second there has been dropped back at some point and then moved further up. Deradida's been settled alongside Herpa for very much of the race like that. And like I said, Zeneba Yima is looking strong as well. So that group has now whittled down to 5 in that leading women's group. And you can see the pacemaker. He's keen to push the pace on. I'm not too sure that women are behind. They're quite happy to settle into racing at this point.
Well, they're about 30 seconds from the 25k marker, I reckon, these women, and just as in the men's race where it picked up around 15k and through 20k and 25k, I wonder if the same is going to be the case here in this women's race as we get this 25k split. There it is, 121.50 in this women's race at 25k. And just to put that in context, 25k 121.50 puts them on schedule for almost exactly 2:18. You probably knew that, Paul. I know you've got all this going on in your head.
Well,
I can hear it whirring sitting here beside you. Eh?
We've got a little predictor on the computer, but yeah, certainly that pace when they're getting down around those times for 5k and per kilometre split, then you know it's quick running.
Well, the fastest time in the world this year is by Ruti Aga. I know it's only the 12th of January, but Ruti Aga of Ethiopia in Xiamen in China last Sunday ran 2:18.45, so it'd be nice to see that mark go here for the race organisers in Dubai. And on the men's side, the fastest time in the world this year, 2:06.06 from Dawit Wolde, another Ethiopian. That too was in Xiamen in China last Sunday. So of course, Pete Connaughton, the race director, looking for world bests to be set here in men's and women's races.
And some great racing too. This is the chase pack of women, so the second group of women that we are looking at there. This is the front group, those 5 women settled in with their drinks now, but taking the opportunity to run along with those bottles for a little bit, as we said, and get that all-important fuel in. Yima moves to the front. Is that just to pick up a bottle, or is she trying to put a little bit of a surge in and work towards that pacemaker, who is a little bit ahead to the front of these women? You see the Burj Al Arab, which will be one of their sight markers that they'll be also working with, so they know that once they make that turn, come back around in front of that, they do have that, just that one loop left to run.
What did you prefer, Paul? Would you have preferred races like this with long straights and nothing breaking up your rhythm, or did you like, oh, for example, I mean, maybe it's a silly question, you like Chicago that has about 40 or 41 turns and you set a world record there, your first world record there. What do you prefer? Do you prefer a busy course or a course that's really straightforward and simple like this one?
I think it depends what you're trying to get out of it. If you're trying to run a time, then a course like this, it is conducive to faster times. Although, as you said that, I found it fast in London because I was able to tap into the atmosphere and the support of the crowd. I think something with it a bit more interesting certainly helps to keep focus, and long straights do make it harder to maintain focus. You've got to rely on a race around you, and if you are out on your own, it's nice to have some things to break it up, but at the same time you train for so long and you're very focused on your splits and tuning into your inner entertainment, if you like, in terms of what your body feels like, what you're doing within the race, and staying committed to that. So it doesn't really matter too much is the answer to your question. I think you just want to be able to be in shape coming into a race.
Now, there's massive prize money on offer today. $80,000 US for the winner, $40,000 for second, $20,000 for her third. There's $168,000 for the top 10 in the men's race, the same for the top 10 in the women's race. I'm sure these athletes aren't thinking about the prize money. It's just a rather nice little bonus at the end of the day. Did you ever think about that during a race? Did you ever think, oh, that'll do, that's a nice little bit of pot for winning the London Marathon or for winning Chicago or New York?
No, I found it much easier to aim for the personal goals, but I do know that obviously it makes a huge difference to some of these athletes, and if you can come out here on your debut and earn a good amount, then that does set you up to be able to go away and train and prepare for the next one with a little bit of security.
29k there for the leading men, so they're about 3 minutes away from the 30k marker, and the times have gradually been creeping downwards towards the goal target of 2:04. I don't know if we'll see a sub 2:04 clocking today. It would be lovely to see a sub 2:05. It is fast. There is a great race unfolding. You're dead right, Paul. A couple of minutes ago you mentioned the fact that there are 2 fabulous races unfolding here. We're in about 2/3 of the way into each race, a little bit beyond that in the men's race, and yet we have still got packs at the front end with athletes racing each other. Time trials are wonderful to see, world records, super fast times, but nothing beats head-to-head competition.
And even not like swerving in front of you as well, although I think that was deceptive on our shot. but you can really see in that shot the skyline far behind, but just really get an idea of the pace that they're running at. And it is deceptive when you're watching it on a screen, isn't it? If you see somebody out there along the course, might try and run with them for a little bit, and it is an extremely fast tempo that they are racing at now, and we're really approaching that territory where if you have made any slight error in terms of the pace that you've run at, you will start to pay for it from here on in. That is Yishma in the women's group. This is the chase group of women. We do have that lead group of 5, remember, away, that includes Tigis Girma, Zeneba, Yima, Deradida, Bertukan Welde and Vedatu Hirpa in the women's race. There we are. That is that group.
Well, Yisma is a 2:27 athlete. Not quite sure what tempo she's on at the moment.
It's down to 2 now, isn't it?
It is down to 2.
Women's group. That was Hirpa. And I think was it Deradida with her?
Look at the size of this men's pack, though. Kiptu's still a pacemaker. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 athletes in this lead men's pack behind the pacemaker Kiptu, with 1 athlete just beginning to drift away in the background there. Girma looking strong. Desalin Girma, he's just 19 years old in that blue vest. Best of 2:08, that was with a win in Taiwan back in September. Back on the 22nd of September, just gone. Here we are, Herpa and Dida. You're right, Paula, down to 2. And shifting too, and I sense that Herpa here is chomping at the bit and trying to break Dida, but Dida is most experienced of the 2.
Well, it's interesting because the pair of them are the 2 who didn't do anything during the first half. They sat back and allowed the other women to kind of jostle for position ahead of them and conserved energy there, and then past halfway when the pacemaker pushed on a little bit, it was those 2 women that were able to go with that. And now if we look back down, I think that's Yima, is it, who's next? It's hard to read from that distance. I'm just trying to gauge. It's either Yima or Girma, because you can see it's a green vest further back down the road, but they've not been able to go with the lead to Vedatu Hirpa and Deradida. Deradida, we know, has the pedigree to perform and knows this course very well as well. She's had the opportunity to win on this course, to finish 3rd last year, and to learn the layout and to know that it's over this final loop that you really need to make your serious running.
Well, Deradida, 3rd here last year. It's a 9th marathon. She's the athlete married to the Olympic marathon champion, Tamarat Tola, winner in the Paris Olympic Games in that astonishing 42k contest in the French capital, where they ran out to the Palace of Versailles on a monstrous hill. Couldn't be more different to this race today. And yet the times were still pretty quick in Paris. Did they run 2:06, the winning time, I think?
They
the
ran
men?
Olympic records, I think, in both races, men and women's races, and some great racing to the end as well. So times extremely fast, given just how steep that hill was. Yes, they came down it as well, but it's also, that's quite hard on your legs to run quickly down a hill. And certainly a race like today, which is more flat, as you can see from those splits, those 5k splits on your screen, the men's race has settled now from that little bit rash, faster 5k split, and it's settled back down to around about 14:40 pace.
Well, they went through 30k in 1:28.29. So again, a split way below 15 minutes, just trying to work it out. I think it's 14:39. So the last 2 5-kilometer splits, and metronomic running, 14:38 and 14:39, and it is quick, and they're still in there. And another athlete just beginning to peel off the back, Paula. This tempo is picked up, and I think we are going to see negative splits after that 62.23 halfway mark. It's taking its toll now as they head towards the last 10k.
You can see there's a definite whittling down of that pack. Every time we come back to it, somebody else has paid the price, if you like, and not been able to stay with it, and is just dropping off the back of that group. And there now are, what, 6, 7 men in there?
I think 6, if we count that one as dropping away just behind the group, 10 or 20 meters behind the group, as having gone. And Kiptu, the pacemaker's gone as well. He's done a fantastic job to 30k. to set this up.
And that's always when we see the real racing start as well, when the pacemaker steps aside and then there's a little bit of a looking around in that group at who is going to take on the pace. Is there somebody who's keen to get to the front and push on and maintain the tempo, or will there be a little bit of a slowing while they all look around at each other and try and determine somebody to go to the front and push on? There's Buki Deriba settled in second. He's not now behind the pacemaker. He is behind the athlete who has taken it on, if you like, and is keen to keep pushing it on. And is that Desalgan?
I'm not sure, but there's an attack going on in the men's race. There's no doubt about that. We've gone back to this women's race, but it's the men's race. There's a vital attack going on, I think, as somebody tries to break this field with about 10 or 11k to go. Herpa and Dida watching each other. Now, is Herpa there gesturing with her hand? I wonder if Dida was getting too close and clipped her a couple of times. That must always be very frustrating and dangerous.
I think she was just gesturing and saying, if you're going to sit behind, you might as well, there's no wind out there, you can see from the trees, you might as well run alongside me rather than bothering me, I think, as she was doing there. And it seems to be more the pacemaker who's keen to keep the pace going with those two lead women, and looking back down the road to see the impact of that little surge has had on the field.
Can't quite see who that is in the green vest as he is attacking it. There's no doubt about it. He seems quite happy to have taken the lead, Paula, and is calling the shots at the moment.
Yeah, we do apologise. It is hard to.
Is it Red Hen?
Read the numbers. I'm not sure it's Red Hen because I think he had a different coloured vest.
But there's no doubt he's not biding his time here. This runner in green. Yeah, I think it is Red Hen.
No, it's Masresha. Masresha, who does have a half marathon personal best of 60.08. And he's the one who has come to the fore as the pacemaker steps aside and now trying to settle in behind the bike, which is not a bad plan either. That bike does, they were told in the technical meeting that certainly the lead vehicle will track the blue line, because there is no blue line on the road here. That will take the shortest route and the quickest route. So if they're unsure to settle in behind that, now he's looking across and decided, right, okay, I've done my bit at the front. Now it's over to someone else, and it's Tamru who now comes to the front, and he's actually put quite a substantial surge in at this point, and you can see the rest of them look across and, are we going to react with that? Are we going to go with it? And now they start to more gradually respond to the surge of Tamru, who said, no, you've done your stint, I'll take over and keep the pace going.
So Tamru at the front, and he has definitely put his foot down because they're slotting in behind him, almost single file fashion. And that is always, I guess you can regard it as a positive, Paul. If you put in a surge and there's nobody up alongside you going, is that the best you got? But they actually tuck in behind you and they're almost sort of hanging on. I always thought that was a kind of a positive, because it means you're testing them and they're beginning to maybe red line, if you know what I mean. So Tamru here should take reinforcement from this. But if you're going to go to the front and put in a little surge, I always think you've got to maintain it. You've got to really see if they are weak or not, because then they could be fooling you. They could be really struggling, but they're hanging onto your coattails. If you maintain it for a few minutes, then you find out.
And remember, a lot of these men are debutants as well, so they will be looking to the likes of Tamru, who does have experience, a lot of experience over the full distance. And so when he goes to the front, they will sit up and take note and respond and go with that. His personal best, 2:05.18, does go back to Dubai here in 2019. So it's a while ago that he ran his personal best, but certainly showing now that he's still capable of, up to this point, moving at this pace. And a change of position as we go back to the lead women. Herpa now in second place and trying to hold on to the heels, the coattails, if you like, of Dera Dida, who's now up alongside the pacemaker and almost trying to get him to pick up the pace, isn't she?
Yeah, interesting, isn't it? We just can't tell if these athletes are talking to the pacemaker there. My own feeling is that now, with 1 hour 36 on the clock, it's probably best for the pacemaker to move aside, let them race, because if one of them starts easing away or dropping back, and the one that stays with the pacemaker realizes there's a gap, I think it's inappropriate for the leading athlete to be getting help from the pacemaker. I think, you know, once it's clear that there's a race underway, that's when the pacemakers should be guided to step out of the picture and let them carry on racing.
Yeah,
Is this Yima in third?
This is Yima in third, and this is the situation that you were talking about earlier, where it almost becomes a little bit unfair, doesn't it? Because the lead two have a pacemaker, and she doesn't. She's working away in no woman's land on her own a little bit there.
No woman's land.
No woman's land.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I like it.
Correct there. And so she's totally focused on her race, whereas the other two are not only able to work together but have the benefit of the pacemaker in there as well. But I do think that in a mixed race they often tend to go right to the end, the pacemaker. And has Hirpa gone?
Well, I'll tell you what, if Herpa has gone, we've just missed it. Apologies for that. But Dida tucked in right behind the pacemaker. And will she be encouraging him to keep going? Herpa.
Back in the men's race, it is still Tamru at the front. They are still pushing and pretty much locked together. Back to the women's race again now, and is that the 30k map that they've just gone over.
Yep.
So will give us a good indication. Certainly she hasn't gone, or maybe not yet at the table for her drink. Yeah, here she goes. I was going to say, with the experience of Dida, she won't miss a bottle, so she knows that she's moving over to grab hers from the table there. Her pacemaker did almost miss his, and she gave him a helping indication. Go back and get yours. Yours is with the men's.
But the pacemaker has dropped out. Dida at that 30k drinks table, 137.54, grabs her drink, pacemaker drops out, the race is on, and Herpa struggling a little bit here, or is she? That's a 10-meter gap. It's the biggest gap there's been between them for the entire race. Yima 27 seconds back. Here she is. She's been on her own for a long time now, having to work in isolation. This is the sort of uneven playing field you've talked about, Paul. We both referenced. And now, you know, you have to think, well, they've still got 40 minutes of running to come. There's a chance Yima here in third place could catch them if they don't get assistance up front.
Well, not only that, but the pacemaker has now dropped down from the front of the race to bring Hirpa back to Dida. That was, he dropped back, got his bottle, and then in dropping back to get that, had actually put himself back with Hirpa. So there's a change there as well, because she now has helped to try and work her way back to Dida. So yeah, you're right, at this point, to my mind, it's far better the pacemaker drops out and allows the three women to battle on their own, because there's a really, really great race hotting up. And in the men's race, the same thing. We've just got a lot of men in there still racing, and it's Guillermo now who's struggling to hold on to the back of that lead group. He's just working himself back up towards them, and that is a lead group of 7 in that men's race that are really racing.
Mind you, they've just run the last 5k in 16:04. They are beginning to really tank along, these leading ladies, reaching 30k in 137.54. Here's that men's pack. Now, are we going to get a situation, and it happens so often, Paula, where because we're in the latter stages, these fellas have got about 25 minutes of running to go. They start watching each other, and it becomes a cat and mouse affair, and they slow a little bit, and any chance of a really quick time just slips away. What is going on here? The pacemaker's getting involved in the racing here, and I'd really like to see him move out of the way, because we'd let's see these two ladies race on their own.
It'll be interesting afterwards to see, do they have anything to say about it? There is Tigist Guillermo, so she is currently in 4th place, trying to work her way back to Yima. She'll be able to see Yima up the road ahead of her. If she can't quite see the athletes, she will be able to see the entourage around them in terms of the camera bikes and the timing vehicles as well, so that will help her in terms of focusing down the road to see what she has to work towards ahead. But we might find that Dida has something to say about the fact that the pacemakers did drop back. She will be able to now work together and almost has to redo the work that she put in to build up a little bit of an advantage, and that was a 3:07 on my clock kilometre split that Dida did to break away, and that's in essence all been undone now as Hirpa has been able to work back to work towards her. So here is the neighbour Yima. She is the current 3rd place, and has been that for a little while now, kind of stuck on her own. And there is first and second. There are first and second locked together again with the pacemaker back with them.
Dera Dida nearest the camera then. Bedatu Herpa, the 25-year-old, former world junior champion at world youth champion, I should say, at 1500 meters. The athlete to the right there, as you see this, has fabulous speed in her legs from a few years back. But what a marvelous year of marathon racing she had last year, with wins in Riyadh, in Prague, and then 5th in Amsterdam, but in a super fast time, her personal best 2:21. So she really has learned how to race, and race well as a marathon runner, and she's in a race now at the front of that women's race down to 2. Here in this men's race, Paul, a very different affair. There's what, 6 or 7 of them locked together. You could throw a blanket over them virtually, a big blanket, and yeah, 1 or 2 of them beginning to look around and study each other's form. And I don't think anybody wants to be the sacrificial lamb. I don't think anybody wants to get their head down now with what, probably 23, 24 minutes of running to go. None of them wants to really be the athlete that lays it on the line and gives away how good they feel almost. It's like a game of cards. Why don't you play your cards close to your chest?
It is, and as I said, particularly because a fair number of these men are making their debut as well, so they're still learning about it, and they don't want to overcommit. They've heard all the stories about how you mustn't put too much in too soon in this race. Tamru has gone from leading the group and really pushing, and so he's now dropped to the back, taking that time to get a little bit of fluid into him. As we skip back to 3rd place in the women's race, and it is Zeneba Yima still working hard and consistently there, back down the road behind. That is the gap to 4th place, and to Tigist Girma, who is working her way back towards her if she can, and hoping that there might be a little bit of fatigue creeping into the legs of Yima, and she might be able to reel her in. And the 2 women at the front still working together, Deradida and Badatu Hiapa. And back to the men's group, still 7 I make it in there, although it is now Tamru who's getting his drink, yes, but struggling to stay in contact with that lead group and starting to detach into maybe one breakaway on the front. Certainly a little bit of breaking up is normal as they go through the drink station. Some men get their bottles sooner, some will put in a little bit of a surge and try and catch people out as they go through that drink station. But it is Gemachu, and there is what we were talking about, just trying to experience running alongside those elite men, and the sheer pace that they are moving at is far more impressive when you see mere mortals moving alongside them and able to gauge off that. But it's certainly Gemachu who, in the green and red and white vest at the front, was the one who took advantage of that drink station. There he is, to push on off the front and starting to really break up that group now behind. Might be a little bit of time before he sees the full impact of that, and they are able to work off that, but maybe not expecting that, if it's particularly debutants, to be able to go with that surge. He is on his debut as well, but certainly feeling good at this point and happy to push on. He does have a number of half marathons under his belt, and best of those 60:11 for 2nd just recently in November. Hasn't really raced a lot over his career indeed, and certainly fresh talent coming into the race. Checking his watch, I think that's fairly standard if you are a debutant over the marathon distance. You will want to be checking, particularly when you're pushing on off the front. Here is the situation back to the elite women's race. Deradida and Badatu Hiapa locked together. There's Segu trying to reel in Gamechu ahead of him. Segu, also known as Bahanu Wendim. That is now carnage back down the road behind them. You can see the gaps are really breaking up, and that is just indicative of the pace that they're running at in the men's race and the effect that that has on the field behind because of the building up and surges in there, but certainly the real wind up of the pace, and backed off a little bit when the pacemaker went out, and now there's some real racing going on.
Well, Elisa DeCisa, that just gone through in isolation, Paula. He's had his day. He's 34 years old. He's one of the greatest marathon runners in history, one of the most consistent, of course. This is Dennis Kimetto, who at 40 is still having a pretty solid day at the races. He went out with the early pace, which was quick enough through the first 10 of 15k, but while he held the world record at one time for 25k, he hasn't done a competitive international marathon for a few years now, Dennis Kimetto, and he said to me a couple of days ago, chatting to him, he said, yeah, I'm still in reasonable shape. He's enjoying his running, but he knows his best days are way behind him. That world record of his over the marathon distance back in 2014 in Berlin, so some 10.5 years ago now. Not quite the same bounce in those legs as 10 years ago, or indeed as a couple of hours ago.
Or 1 hour ago.
Yeah, exactly. No, bless him, he's had a fabulous, albeit brief career, Dennis Kimetto. But back to this men's race. Up at the front end anyway, 1 hour 47 on the clock, so less than 20 minutes to go. Remember, they went through halfway, if you joined us in the last few minutes, in 62.23, and it's continued to wind up through the last 5 kilometre segments, and it's almost certain they're going to run negative splits here.
There is Bute Gemachu making his debut over the marathon distance. Did not race at all didn't race at all last year. His last race comes from 2023. As I said, we just have that 60-11 half, but not a huge amount of events for us to gauge off coming into this race. Certainly he must have trained well to be able to trust in that and push on as hard as he has done, and look at the breaking up that he's decimated that leading group, hasn't he? Shattered it into pretty much everybody running on their own in little detached groups. There might be a couple running together further back, but behind him it is Bahanu Wendim Segu, who's trying to get himself back into that lead position if he can, or back onto the heels of Gemachu up the road ahead of him.
Well, this would be typical for Dubai, wouldn't it, to have a debutant winning the race if Gemachu can maintain this form. Here is Yima back in third place in the women's race, who's been on her own for a long time now. She was up with the lead pack at halfway, 69.12. Lovely shot looking northwards there towards the downtown area, I suppose you could call it, of this massive city, Dubai. 3.5 million people in Dubai these days, as we see the Gulf to the left there and some of the glorious beach areas. And that is looking northwards along the main strip where the athletes run backwards and forwards. Now Gemachu, I tell you what, Paul, he looks pretty relaxed, doesn't he? He's checking his watch, bouncing along. Those gaps have opened up really quickly.
He does. I mean, he took advantage of, went through the drink station and took advantage of that kind of a little bit of confusion, a little bit of distraction as the men got their bottles and pushed on to really go hard off the front. And you can see the impact that that's had on the men behind him. They're trying to get back to him. Certainly Segu is really trying to reel him in. Tamru working very hard here, but they are all fragmented on their own, trying to get back onto level terms. They're obviously all working hard. I mean, Gemachu, on his face you can see he's working hard, but he's probably thinking, well, think it would be that easy to break away. Put in a little bit of a surge to test, and that's the impact that he's had on the field. What he now has to do is maintain that concentration, maintain that gap that he's worked hard to create for as long as he can, and he's now he's approaching 38 kilometers will be the next marker for him, and from there he knows it's only 4k. It's hard to hold on, but it's tough.
Do you think he's gone too early, Paula? 15 minutes to go. It's, I mean, it really has ripped them asunder, hasn't it? This surge over the last few minutes. We had a pack of, literally 5 minutes ago, we had a pack of 6 or 7 fellas. Look at it now. 25, 30-meter gaps between the top 3 or 4.
Well, it certainly tested them. There's the predicted race finish. So they were slowing off, and he did just put in that surge, and he probably was thinking this might take a couple of these to get away, and in fact on the first surge he managed to break away. So we've seen him looking around, we've seen Segu try to make his way to work back towards him. Tamru is also working really hard there. There's the last kilometer split, 2:57, so it's not crazy pace that he's thrown down. It is a quicker pace, and I think now he has just decided, okay, well, it worked perhaps sooner than I expected, so now it is just about consolidating that and, like I say, maintaining focus over this last 4 or 5 kilometers of this race, and he will be eyes focused on trying to see if he can see the Burj Al Arab up ahead of him to work towards, and then know that it is just that short, that quick left-hand turn and a short run in to the finish, which will be an extremely welcome sight, because make no mistakes, they're all hurting at this stage.
Tamru, the gaps about 30 meters between him and the leaders, and here is that leading pair in the women's race.
No, this is third and fourth.
Third and fourth. That's Yima.
Well, this is Yima
to the
and
right
this is Tigges Girma, and I think Tigges Girma has worked past Yima, who has been in third on her own, isolated for a lot of the second half of this race, and now that is Tigges Girma moving into third position and looking down the road ahead of her to see, can she get back to Badatu Hirpa and Deradida with the pacemaker the last time we saw them up the road ahead of her.
Tigges Girma, the fastest in the race, so has moved into third place there as she makes that final turn to the north end of the course. She's got, what, about 8k to go, 5 English miles. He's moving well.
I think that's Segu in second place the last time that we saw him.
Is that Segu? Yes, it is, I think. Berhane Segu making his debut. He's a 59.42 half marathon runner. He was busted for doping, served a 4-year doping ban between 2019 and 2023, but came back this year with 19th, last year rather, with 19th in the World Cross Country Championships, but he missed those 4 years of competition. And now this leader, Gemechu, he can't widen that gap though, can he? It's still about 25 meters.
He can't widen it, but tantalizingly Segu can't close it either, so it is holding, and 2:56 I think for that last kilometre, so 2:57, 2:56 there. He's consistent in his pace, which is what he needs to do, and just needs to maintain that focus and keep going. He's worked hard, and from that shot, and remember that is the view that Segu is getting, that he's psychologically trying to work on. That is a task ahead of him, to reel that in, and he's working really hard, and he's not really making any inroads into that space.
Well, Jumeirah Beach Road stretches to the north as they negotiate this little dogleg here, and then they'll take the left into the finish straight, and that would be a very welcome sight for these fellas to Umsukum Street, which is the last few hundred meters.
Crowd starting to get excited and build up. We do have the big Ethiopian support crews and music stands out in the finish area, not too far from our commentary booth, and they will be banging those drums and getting ready to really encourage this. And they've got a great race being set up for the closing stages of this race, because here is Buta Gamechu, who's worked really hard to set up this lead and head back, working very hard, and can they make any inroads into that lead? Checking his watch again and trying to gauge from the bikes and from the signs on the side of the road, which will count down for him if he's not already counting down in his head.
Well, the question is it Buta Gemechu or Gemechu Buta? Because our start list is Gemechu Buta. Not quite sure which way round his name is, but Segu here working hard, and he still looks good. And I'll tell you what, Paula, I like about this is if you're in second place, you've got a target, somebody 25 meters away. They haven't got a big enough gap for it to be a really unachievable, unattainable goal. So he's working very, very hard to close down on Gemechu. It'll be a fascinating last few minutes for the men, what, with about 9 minutes of running to come.
So here we are back with the women's race, and I'm guessing this is the lead woman in Dera Dida, so settled in, still behind the pacemaker. Pacemaker did help here to get back to her a couple of kilometers ago, but it looks as though now she might have broken Wadatu Hirpa. Can't see her certainly in that shot. If we swing around a little bit, we might get an indication of that gap to second, and whether Tigist Girma in third is able to make any inroads on that gap to second and indeed up to first. There we go. So it's not too substantial at this point in the race. That is the view that, well, this is almost the view that Tigist Girma might have, trying to work her way back to Hirpa, and then Hirpa, that tantalizing distance between her and Dera Dida, the winner, and huge difference in that, and not too many meters in there.
I was going to say, it's almost identical to the men's race, isn't it? About 20 meters between the leader and the chasing athlete. Herpa here has got a goal. Dida, with all that race experience being applied now, she's been in this position many times before.
So there is 40k drink station, and that will be a welcome sight for these men, and taking advantage of it is Segu there, taking his bottle, getting a last little sugar shot to try and summon up a little bit more energy and try and put some inroads into that gap ahead to Gemechu up the road.
Herpa chasing hard, and it looks so similar, doesn't it? Count the gap as they pass a cone, say. It's what, about 4 seconds, the gap between these two, but that is a gulf in marathon terms. And Herpa here, remember the difference between first and second, $80,000 and $40,000. Those 25 meters represent $40,000 at the moment in prize money differential. Dera Dida, the most experienced, and using that experience here. 28 years old, third here last year, a winner here as well in years gone by. Back in 2023, a couple of years ago, on a different course, she won in 2:21.11. Same day her brother-in-law won the men's race. Now, is that gap growing a little bit, Paula?
I think it's holding, but it is, I think it's slightly closer than in the men's race. Yeah, I would like to see the gap back to third as well, and to see where is this ticket. No, that's, so we're back to the men's race now. So there, that gap
Gemechu
is slightly bigger, isn't it? I think.
Well, there's the times at 40k, 1:58.10 at 40k.
And it's 14 seconds back to Segu, and then another 16 seconds to Tamru behind him. So there is your first, second and third as it stands at the moment in the men's race, and that fragmenting really happened just after the 35-kilometer mark, when Gemechu made a little bit of a surge and actually managed to break away at that point, and then he's worked really hard to hold it to this point, and he will now be really waiting for that left-hand turn swing in towards the finishing straight.
Well, that 1:58.10 split at 40k represents about 2:04.30 tempo, so the pace has picked up. His 39th kilometre was at 2:49. He's absolutely flying in this men's race. That's why the time has come rocketing down over the last half hour or so. It will be, I think, pretty spectacular negative splits in this men's race today, in this 24th edition of the Dubai Marathon. Yes, 2:35 according to, that can't be right, they're saying
wow.
The 40th kilometre is 2:35. It's not that quick, there's no way. But anyway, we do know he's accelerated.
Yeah, and he's really trying to hold on and consolidate and extend that lead that he built up, and checking his watch as he's going along just to see if some gauge of the time. But really now it is about just making sure that you just count down in your head and just get through this last, what, kilometre or so. Not even that, is it? It must be, yeah, he's approaching 41 kilometres now.
He's managed these last few kilometres well, hasn't he?
He has.
I mean, from now on, with less than 2k to go, it's about race management. Just hang in there and keep it going. This will be the biggest win of his career by well, many tens of thousands of dollars if he does take first place, and it will give him status on the world marathon scene. It'll make him a desirable commodity. Race directors will be wanting him, And I suspect, Paula, now with the shoes and protecting legs so much, he's got a chance of going for one of the big April marathons.
Certainly he's got a chance of being able to come back, and another indicator of somebody trying to run alongside him at pace, and he looks across as if to say, is that all you've got? Can you not help me for a little bit longer? But certainly back down the road, it does look as though he's stretching that gap, and here is that slight left-hand bend. He'll keep swinging round, and then he will see the finish line up ahead of him. And we'll be glad that he can see that. There's a little while yet to go for that final turn, but certainly not too far. 41st kilometre, well, yeah, that came in at 3:28. That's not correct. So that balances out the quicker one from earlier, but certainly into his final bit of running now, and we'll just be focusing a little bit of help maybe from that lead bike alongside him that he can tap into.
So 2 hours, 2 minutes on the clock. Just a couple of minutes and bits to go in this men's contest, where Gemechu Guichet has run quite superbly in his marathon debut. He's almost broken 60 minutes for a half marathon. His times on the track at 5,000 and 10,000, even his 10K on the road personal best, don't suggest anything special, which implies, Paul, that he's very much a marathon runner. We don't have an age for him, but I think this is a fella who is now announcing himself on the world marathon scene. Less than a kilometre to go. He'll make the left-hand turn into Sukim Street now, very, very shortly. There it is, the sweep into Sukim, and the finish line will come into view. It has been a quite magnificent run, and I tell you what, he's run it with a mature head. You'd think he'd got a bunch of marathons behind him, the way he's handled this run over the last 10 kilometres.
He has really raced well. You could see he put a bit of a surge in, managed to break away, then thought, right, okay, I've done that now, I have to consolidate this, and you can see he's hurting, but he also knows that he's running a very quick time, and he must be extremely happy with his debut over this distance, and now he's able to stretch out a little bit, and that gap behind is growing and growing, so he shouldn't come under any attack now in these closing meters. There is second place just coming around the bend behind him, Segu. Head down, just working everything that he's got left into these final stages.
So into the last 200 or 300 meters now. This young man in his marathon debut looking quite magnificent. Superb running from Gemechu here as he heads towards the line. He's destroyed this field over the last 5 or 6 kilometers since the pack broke apart. Checks his watch there. 2 hours, 4 minutes on the clock now. Won't be a new course record, but it will be super fast, and significantly, it will be the fastest time in the world this year. It was 2:06.06 by Dawit Waldo in Jammen last Sunday. Today here, in this 24th edition of the Dubai Marathon, the world's fastest time in these early days of 2024 will indeed be set in this glorious city. Gemechu drives towards the line, looking strong, looking superb. Is that a smile or is it a grimace? It matters not, because he has destroyed a very strong field here of athletes who know this course well. Well, he'll know it well after this. Gemechu, head down, pumping hard with the arms, all the way to the line. Look at the clock, he's going to be inside 2:05. What a run from the debutant to win here in Dubai in 2025. 2:04.50 unofficially. That is one of the great debut runs of recent years. In second place, coming through strongly, is Segu. He too has also had a fabulous run. He's worked hard to maintain that second place. It's his debut as well. The reputation of Dubai for being the race that projects great runners into fabulous marathon careers is strengthened all the more here.
And that is Tamru coming through in third, and he's not too far in the end off his personal best, and certainly the quickest time that he's run for a good 5-6 years, so he will be happy with that return to form.
He will indeed. Tamru finishing in third place. Shifera Tamru, the 26-year-old. His best 2:05.18, missed by just 10 or 15 seconds. That was when he was 5th in Dubai in 2019. He's third here today. And Gurma coming home for 4th place by the looks of things. Desalen Gurma, just 19 years old, Gurma. His best 2:08.30. He's going to break that by well, a couple of minutes and maybe more, as we see the winner being attended to. Desalegn looks like he's going to finish in 5th place. I think Germa is out of shot. Is that?
Yeah, Germa's just ahead of these two. That's Heiler and Mecherche.
5th and 6th coming through. Here is Germa working hard towards the line, and that's still great running. Look, 2:06.5 on the clock for Desalegn Germa. 19 years old, modest track personal best. 2:08.30 his win from last September in Taiwan, and today he gets 4th place. 2:06.51 unofficially. Brilliant stuff from him. Just off the rostrum. Ailu takes 5th.
Just getting ahead of Mecherche, who has been ahead of him for much of the race. Ailu managed to reel him in across the line. More debutants coming in there with really, really strong performances. That was Bukki Dariba just coming into the straight. One of the men pushing the pace early on in this race. That is a tired Bukki Dariba.
Yeah, tired, the understatement there, frankly. He looks really, really fatigued, doesn't he? The legs just struggling to get them through. Ailu finished in 5th place. Janie Ailu Bikila, to give him his full name. And Paula, these are still quick times in the 2.6s, 2.7s.
Yeah, really quick racing, especially as we said, given that they set off fairly sedately for that first 5 kilometers and then really built up into racing from there. And then when the pacemaker stepped aside, there was a little bit of a slowing and a settling before Gemachuk pushed away around about that 35-kilometer mark and rewarded with an extremely strong debut, which sets the bar for 2025.
Well, Demissi there, coming home in, I think, 7th place. Just checking that. Dariba, Goitom. Well, there will still be big numbers under 2:10 here today. Ati Nafu checking his watch, suffering a little bit in the closing stages as Dariba and Goitom come through. And yes, Tadele Demissi was a 7th in 2:08.20. Both these fellas, Dariba and Goitom, in 8th and 9th, just outside 2:09.
That is a personal best for Goitom. He has managed to come away, and of course a personal best for Dariba because it was his debut over the distance.
Goitom setting a personal best by over 2 minutes there after his 6th in Madrid in April last year.
Coming in, also his debut.
That's 9th place, I think, isn't it, from Ati Nafu? So just to confirm those first 3 for Bute Gemechu, winning in 2:04.50 from Berehanu Segu, 2:05.14, the 24 seconds, the gap at the finish line, and Chifera Tamru third, 2:05.28. Here is the form of the champion, Bute Gemechu, in his debut at this race. We don't have an age for him. That is the case with a few of these Ethiopian athletes when they're relatively raw to road racing. Many of them making their first or one of their earliest outings outside Ethiopia. They grasp the opportunities with both hands.
Yeah, indeed, he hasn't raced. We did say he didn't race at all last year. His more recent races, not too many of those go back to 2023, but certainly coming out and starting off 2025 on great form and setting his stall out for the year ahead. And here is the leader in the women's race, Deradida, all on her own now. The pacemaker has stepped aside, so she has the pace truck up ahead with the clock on it for focusing her eyes on. And second place, Hiepa, just behind her. They have gone through 40 kilometers, and that is a 10-second gap between those two women, and then let's see how far back to Tigist Girma, who was in 3rd place in this race last time we checked in on them.
Do you think that is an unassailable gap, Paula, with two kilometres to go, so about just over 6 minutes of running's come?
No, because
10 seconds.
It's very hard to tell. It's much easier for the women out there because they know what they've got left in their legs and what they feel like and how strong they are. I think it all depends. It's not unassailable if Deradida has gone too soon and starts to struggle in this race, but if she's going to maintain that, then it is a tantalizing distance, not quite as big as we saw in the men's where it was about 14-15 seconds. We'll see how much she closes in.
Well, we had a winner, a debutante in the men's race. Here he is, Gemechu, the champion.
Gemechu, many congratulations, Dubai Marathon 2025 champion. It's your first ever marathon. What does this win mean to you?
በመጀመሪያ ማራቶን ምን ተሰማህ? እንኳን ለዚህ ድል አበቃ።
አሜን በጣም ደስታ ይሰማኛል።
Happy for this situation.
Talk to us about your tactics. How did you win this race today?
እንዴት አድርገህ በምን አይነት ሁኔታ በምን አይነት ታክቲክ ልታሸንፍ ቻልክ?
መጀመሪያ እኔ ማሸነፍ ሳይሆን ጥሩ ሰዓት አስመዝግባለሁ ብዬ ነው አሰብኩ። ግን ሄዶ ወደ 37 36 አካባቢ ሲደርስ በቃ ሄዶ እንደሚያሸንፍ አወኩ እንደ ሁኔታ ሲያይ።
I'm running for a good time, but unfortunately after 36 kilometers the situation was changing and I'm getting a winner.
And finally, it is World Championship year in September in Japan. How does this set you up? There's a lot of racing to go, but it's a good start for you, I guess.
በሚቀጥለው ወርልድ ቻምፒዮን ላይ ጃፓን ላይ በምን አይነት ሁኔታ ልትሳተፍ ትችላለህ?
ጥሩ ሰርቼ ጥሩ ሁኔታ ማስመዝገብ እችላለሁ ማለት ነው።
ከዚህ የበለጠ ሰርቼ በጥሩ ሁኔታ I will be fine. I will make more training and I will be fine for the next running in Japan.
Thank you very much. Congratulations.
Thank you. Congratulations.
Well, that's fascinating. He's almost anticipating being selected for the Ethiopian team for the World Championships in Tokyo come September. There is confirmation of the first 10 in this 24th edition of the Dubai Marathon. Buta Gemechu, 2:04.50, a comfortable win, 24 seconds, the gap back to Berahanu Segu, his compatriot, 2:05.14 in second, and then Chifera Tamru, 2:05.28, another 14 seconds back in third. Great racing here in Dubai, where in particular in both men's and women's races today, the reputation for the race to discover new marathon talent has been underlined, has been strengthened. Desalin Germa, well, 2:06.51, his time in 4th place. That's his consolation, is a pretty quick time, it has to be said. Indeed, a personal best by a couple of minutes and more for Desalin Germa in 4th. And plenty of workers here from Ethiopia, of course, Paula, out celebrating their great races. It is, I think, without any shadow of doubt, the national sport of Ethiopia, where cycling is a big sport, but running is it.
It is, and they send a lot of people here, a lot of people come out to cheer and support it. It's become known as the place to lay down your form for the year ahead and your hopes, and come out and show how hard you've trained. And in the women's race, Deradida still leading out there from the splits coming in on my screen. She is slowing, but so is Hirpa behind her, so that gap is maintaining about the same, and in fact it is, 2 minutes or so back to third, so no danger for Hirpa from behind. It is just a question of, can she make any impact, can she make any dent in that 10 seconds up the road ahead of her to Deradida, or is Deradida on her way to retaining that title from a couple of years ago here in Dubai?
Well, she looks strong, doesn't she? Still good stride length, slight forward lean there for her, but she's chasing hard, but the gap is 10 seconds to Deradida up the road ahead of her. There's the kilometre splits, and look at that 40th kilometre, 3:17. That's where the break really did open up the gap a little bit more. 3:18, the 37th kilometre. Quite a variation in those kilometre splits. But Dera Dida looking very, very strong indeed, and I don't think much chance of her being caught here. 2:16 on the clock. Negotiating this last turn. Dida has made it. Herper leans into Shakim Street in that last few hundred meters to the finish line.
So they are building into that now, and Dera Dida can see that clock ahead of her on that car. Her personal best, remember, stands at 2:19.24. So looking down the road ahead of her now, Herper in that shot looks as though she's extremely close. Can she close any at all? What has she got left in this final straight, Shakim Street? They can see the finish line ahead of them. Head back. Dera Dida is certainly fatigued at this point.
Well, they have put on a quite magnificent race, this pair, over the last half hour or so since the pack broke up. But there's no doubting that we have a fabulous run on the way from an established champion, Dera Dida, winner here back in 2023, regains top spot. Herper is coming back at her though. Look at this, is she going to run out of road? Herper sprinting for all she's worth here. But Datu Herper, best of 2:21.09. She's guaranteed a personal best. Is she going to get the win as the legs go from under Dida? Dida, the head is back. I wonder if she's getting any warning, any information. Herper knows that the line is coming, but she knows she can catch her great compatriot and great rival. And within sight of the finish line, within a few dozen yards of the finish line, but Datu Herper gains the lead and takes the win surely now. 2:18 on the clock. Drama here in the closing stages in Dubai 2025. Wow! Dera Dida, there's nothing the 28-year-old can do about it. She won here in 23. She was third here last year, but this year we have a new champion. But Datu Herper, the 25-year-old, takes the title in Dubai, punches the air, newfound energy, with the adrenaline pumping through those veins, having taken the lead about 100 meters out. Quite astonishing, and a personal best there by about 3 minutes for Datu Herper to take the win. One layer of drama upon another. Paula, we haven't seen a finish like that. A closing surge to take the lead for many a year in a major city marathon.
Well, you asked me about a kilometre out, did I think that she could reel her in? And I did say it depended what was left in the legs of both runners, and I think the change there was as they swung into that straight, you saw the impact of just misjudging the marathon distance, and that's what it does to you. If you contrast Dera Dida's form with the final 100 metres and a kilometre or so ago, the head went back, everything was tying up. She was trying to move to that finish line, but there was just nothing left in her legs, and Datu Herper sensed that and was able to find something more, finish far more strongly, and both of them rewarded with personal bests, but in very, very contrasting styles. And here is third position now in Tigist Girma.
Well, but Datu Herper taking the win there, third time lucky for her. She was third here in 2020, she was seventh here 2023, and she wins today. And that World Youth 1500 meter title from 10 years ago, maybe the old leg speed, the muscle memory counted for a lot here today as she sprinted through the last couple of hundred to take the win. Tigist Girma, well, she's never done a half marathon. This is her 17th marathon. 2:18.52 her best from Valencia a couple of years back. She's just outside that, but she makes third place, and another really strong run for her. But Paula, quick times here in Dubai this morning, with the leading two athletes running 2:18, and Tigist Girma here taking third place. The winner of Sydney a couple of years back, 7th in Valencia as well, where she set her personal best a couple of years back. Her first time here, and she takes third place, makes it onto the rostrum. Tigist Girma in her first ever Dubai marathon. Herper looks like she could go round again. It's amazing what a bit of adrenaline does for you, isn't it?
The change in her composure on her face, and certainly in her cadence, when she realised that not only was she battling to hold on to second, she had a chance for the victory, and she seized that chance and really picked it up. And Tigis Girma was the fastest in the field before the race, coming into that and consolidates that with a third place. And here is another debutante coming through, I think in fifth, is she, Welde?
I think she's
Yima's come through in fourth. Yima in fourth. And so I think Welde is in fifth place further back down the road. Of course, personal best because she is a debutante over this distance.
Well, that winning time for Badatu Herpa confirmed at 2:18.27, just 4 seconds ahead of Dera Dida, who took second place, was leading until about 100 meters to go. Dera Dida, so the experience of so many marathons and a couple of previous occasions she's run here, so had Herpa, mind you, but that experience counted for nothing when it came to your legs going from under you. She is mortal, they're all mortal, and they've provided us with fabulous racing here this morning. Herpa, she cannot calm down. I don't blame her. Tahir, this sixth place for Tahir, I think. 2:22, still really good racing, really good time.
Indeed, she might sneak under her personal best here. That stands at 2:23.14. And you can see the tape in the camera shot. It's just, can she get there in time? Everybody tired, of course, the pace that they've run it out there today. The sun is quite high now in the sky as well. And here is Mulu, a long time part of that second chase group. She's worked her way right back up.
Yeah, Tahir, 2:23 in Changsha last October. She likes racing in China. She does indeed set a personal best there by, what, about 20 seconds, something like that. Brilliant running from her. She won in Changjiang in October 23 in 2:31. This 13th marathon, and she finishes unofficially there in about, is it 6th place? Just checking, the computer taking a while to update itself here.
6th or 7th place, I think. That was Mulu coming in, and then I think this is Kabeda coming in to finish now, also on her debut, and only actually raced domestically up to this point, so a strong first race outside of Ethiopia for her. Yishma coming in.
Yene coming through now as well. Quite big gaps in this women's race when you think the winner ran 2:18. This is now going to be a 2:24 run, just outside 2:24 there for Yizma.
Still a personal best by a couple of minutes.
Yeah, 2:27.46 her previous best. Kebebush Yizma Zewolde Mariam, to give her her full name. 2:25, I suppose, is a nice benchmark for athletes to get under, isn't it? We measure every 5K, and the 5-minute markers are a significant 2:20, 2:25, 2:30, of course, always a big barrier for elite athletes. But Yene makes it by some 24 seconds there, 2:24.36 unofficially in her debut. Well, here's that astonishing finish, Paula. You and I haven't seen something like this for many a year. Herpa taking the win, gaining the lead about 100 meters out from Dera Dida, and winning here today in spectacular fashion, punching the air. I tell you what, these Ethiopian athletes are very often very, very introvert and quiet and shy. Well, that shyness dissipated there over the last few meters, didn't it?
She really did. It was almost reminiscent of Savannah Satin crossing the line there when she was celebrating in how fast that she finished, reeling that in the closing stages, and the contrast to the experience of Dera Dida, who doesn't often get it that wrong.
And here is the winner.
Badatu, congratulations. What a fantastic win. What were you feeling coming in towards the finish line where you could see Dera Dida just in front of you?
እንኳን ደስ ያለሽ በጣም እንኳን ደስ ያለሽ አንደኛ በመውጣትሽ ምን እየተሰማሽ ነው ያለው ይሄን አሸንፈሽ አንደኛ በመውጣትሽ ምን እየተሰማሽ ነው ያለው
በመጀመሪያ ደረጃ በጣም ደስ ብሎኛል ማለት ስራ ሰርተናል እንደማሸንፍ አውቅ ነበር ከመጀመሪያው
She said that she's been working very hard to win it, and she was very much confident that she would be winning it today.
In commentary today, they were saying you were the dark horse, and for a moment there you were about 10 seconds off the pace. Did you always feel that you could win this race?
እንግዲህ እሷ ምትልሽ ይህንን እንደምታሸንፊ እርግጠኛ ሆነሽ ነበር ወይ? 10 ሰከንድ ነው የቀረሽ የነበረው ለማሸነፍና እንዴት ነው ይህን ምን ተሰማሽ? ለዚህ ጥረት አድርገሽ ነበር ወይ ነው ምትልሽ?
ያው በጣም ስለሰራን ጥረት አድርጌ ነበር ማለት ከ35 በኋላ መሄድ ስለምችል እርግጠኛ ነበርኩ ሙሉ ኮንፊደንስ ነበር
She said that she was having a full confidence after the 35 kilometer, and she was trying to really to reach to the finish line, and she was so much confident about it that she would be really reaching to the first line. Yeah.
It was a very strong field today, and for a long time in the race there were 6 of you all together. Did it help to have a big group to run with and a very good pacemaker?
አብራችሁ በግሩፕ ሆናችሁ 6 ሆናችሁ በመሮጣችሁና በግሩፕ ስለሰራችሁ ይሄንን ውጤት ለማምጣት ረድቶሻል ወይ ነው የምትልሽ?
አዎ
Being in a group, and she was so confident that being a group, that's really helped them to finish the line. Yes.
And when you crossed the line in a very fast time of 2:18, you still looked full of running. Do you think there's more to come?
ሁለት ከ18 ካሸነፍሽም በኋላ አቅሙ ነበረሽ ኢነርጂም ነበረሽ ከዛ በላይ መሮጥ እንደምትችይ ይሰማሽ ነበር ወይ ነው
ማለት አላየሁትም ነበር ስንት እንደሮጥኩት
Yeah, she was saying that she did not even watch it. She hasn't even watched the time. She was having that energy still while she was really reaching to the finish line.
That's fantastic. Congratulations.
Well, she wasn't concerned about the time, Paula. I guess that's the last thing in your mind when you're winning a major city marathon and you've just had an astonishing run and run a big personal best. Maybe you're not looking at the clock. She was too busy racing. I mean, there was it was almost like a middle distance race there, wasn't it, the way she kicked past?
It was. I mean, you had all the exciting elements of the marathon in there, didn't you? You had an experienced runner, forged a gap. You wouldn't expect that to fold, but it did unfold in that way, and you could see the fatigue really hitting suddenly poor Deradida, who's then struggling, almost running through quicksand, trying to fight her way up that home straight, still rewarded with a personal best, and that line could not come quickly enough for her. And for Hirpa, for a long time focused on trying to maintain second, is then suddenly working really hard to reel her in and to just do the unassailable.
There it is, confirmation of that win by Bedatu Herpa. 2:18.27 here in Dubai in 2025. Deradida 2:18.31. Caught in the last 100 metres, loses by 4 seconds. Tigist Garma 2:20.45. Good run in third place. The consolation for Deradida, way under 2:20 again here in this 24th edition of the Dubai Marathon. Zeynep Yeba, well, 2:21.11 for her. She's an experienced racer, but today just outside the rostrum positions. And good running too, look at that, the first 7 under 2:24. And once again, confirmation of that men's result here in Dubai. Bute Kemachu 2:04.50, that is quite some debut. Berohan Segu 2:05.14, 24 seconds back, and Shifera Tamru also making the rostrum. Of course, the elite field's dominated by Ethiopian entries, and therefore the top 10 in the men's race dominated by the Ethiopian flag. Boki Deriba, who's one of my dark horses, as making a debut down in 8th place, 2:09.05. Still a really solid debut. Paula, 2:10 used to be the benchmark for world-class racing. It may not be anymore, but it is still a very, very important mark to get under.
Well, particularly when, again, you go back and you look at the splits of that race, and it was real racing out there. It wasn't a consistent, solid run for time. There were surges thrown in there, and that's a more difficult way to race a marathon. And so I think there's definitely room for improvement and places to build off from so many of those men and women who've made their debuts out there today.
As it turned out, it wasn't negative splits, was it? 62.23 the first half, 62.37 the second half. but nonetheless it was a fluctuating race, and it was a great race. I think that's the important thing. No course records here today, but fabulous racing on both the men's and women's side. Spectacular finishing racing on the women's side.
And as we look out on that view there, and plenty of men and women still out there racing over the full distance, over the 10K and the 4K yet to come. So thank you, Dubai Marathon, once again for some really exciting racing that we've enjoyed watching and commentating on, and good luck to everybody out there still competing.
Yeah, fabulous racing. The champions here in Dubai today, both from Ethiopia. No change there, but a superb day's racing here in Dubai. Bye-bye from us.